Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Thursday, December 9th, and we have a great lineup on today's show. So many great conversations. I am very, very excited to get things kicked off, and we are going to do that, first off, with a conversation between Alan and Steve George, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Weaveworks. Weaveworks is all about Kubernetes, and so Steve George and Alan discuss GitOps adoption trends, and they also talk about the Weave GitOps Enterprise, which is the first GitOps platform that automates continuous application delivery and automated operational control for Kubernetes at any scale. So this is a great conversation the two have about the technology as well as the topic of GitOps in general. So great conversation. You definitely want to check that one out. It's a great one to start with, too, I got to tell you, on today's broadcast. The second one is a conversation between Alan and Pradeep Padala, who is the CEO of Filament. This is a conversation that Alan had at the recent KubeCon LA 2021 conference, and he was out there, and so he did a number of interviews, including this one with Pradeep, and they talk about low-code and whether Pradeep and the Filament crowd are making low-code solutions available for developers or for citizen developers. What's the difference and why organizations need to kind of keep the two in mind when they are looking at low-code. So it's another great conversation. And I think it does clear up a lot of kind of mystery around low-code and why certain organizations are faring much better with low-code technologies than others. So great conversation there. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast, and this is part 3 of a 3-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with Kevin Thomas, who is a senior software engineer in test over at Blue Vector, which is a Comcast company. And Kevin has a conversation with Mike about all the things cybersecurity related, hacking, ethical hacking, cybersecurity, obviously, also grassroots efforts around cybersecurity. And as always, it is a great conversation. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Cloud Native Days with Kubernetes virtual event that we had. This one features Donovan Brown, who is the Partner Program Manager over at Microsoft. Donovan has a topic. Its presentation is called Microservices Made Easy, Getting Started with Dapper. And so he offers up an introduction to Dapper, which is the distributed application runtime. And it simplifies cloud native application development. So this is a great presentation that he offers as a primer of sorts, if you will, to the Dapper technology. And you can spend more time adding value and less time doing all the grunt work. So it's a great presentation. One definitely worth checking out. So I do encourage you to stick around for that one. After that, I'm back for the headlines. And then I have a conversation with Gil Rappaport, who is the general manager for access management at CyberArk. And we talk about visibility from the customer experience point of view. And so many organizations are continuing to operate with limited visibility into their user activity and sessions associated with web applications. Now, this is not just customer, this is also employee visibility. What are folks doing on the web? And how is that impacting cybersecurity of an organization at large? And then from an employee perspective, how does this impact the risk of insider threats and credential theft? So good stuff all the way around. Gil's got a lot of insight into the visibility issue that so many organizations are dealing with, and it's a great conversation. After that, I speak with Theo Zafirakos, who is the CISO over at Terra Nova Security, and he and I discuss ways in which organizations can effectively build security-aware teams and strengthen and maintain their cybersecurity awareness across the organization. This is something that so many organizations are grappling with, regardless of whether they are in-person, remote, or hybrid working environments. He dives into how organizations can support their security teams and create a cybersecurity-centric culture no matter how they are working. And this is a great conversation that Theo and I have about this. And as I said, it's a very relevant topic right now. After that, I have yet another interview. This one is with Polly Mitchell-Guthrie, who is the VP of Industry Outreach and Thought Leadership at Kinaxis. Polly and I talk about the current supply chain disruptions and some ways in which organizations can use AI and machine learning to better predict, understand, and navigate uncertainties as they arise. This has been an ongoing issue for a lot of organizations, and supply chain disruptions are being felt all across the board. And there is a way to use this technology to kind of soften the blow, if you will, kind of better predict when these supply chain disruptions are going to occur so that organizations can plan ahead. Polly is very, very well versed in this topic, and she and I had a great conversation. I really, really enjoyed having this conversation with her. Fascinating stuff. It's a fascinating topic. After that, I've got the webinars preview, and then Mitch Ashley comes on for his Analyst Corner segment. He speaks with Dr. Nick West, who is the Chief Medical Officer and Divisional Vice President of Global Medical Affairs for Vascular at Abbott, and they discuss how medical device manufacturers are focusing on the customer experience. That is a really fascinating topic. They are mirroring what a lot of digital companies are doing in many, many different industries. So putting the customer first and the customer experience first, I think is super important, especially in the medical device industry, where you kind of have to have ease of use in order to make something work the best way for you. And when it comes to health issues, that is top of mind for so many organizations and people. So this is a great conversation that Mitch and Dr. Nick have, and it's really, really interesting to think about it from a medical device perspective. After that, we have what is another Analyst Corner, but this one actually includes not only Mitch Ashley, but also Judith and Dan from the Techstrong Research Group. And so I don't want to call this the Analyst Corner because it's all three of them, so I'm going to call it the Analyst Triangle. And all three of them were at the AWS reInvent show last week. And so this is basically a post-mortem discussion that they have amongst each other, talking about what they saw at the show, what they see, some trends based on what they saw, and talking about pretty much anything from API security to enterprise adoption, cloud stickiness, increasing cloud competition, and let's not forget the AWS bug bust competition that actually garnered a Guinness World Record in the process. So they have lots to discuss in their conversation, and as always, it's great to hear all three of them. All right, after that, we close things out with The View with Vizard. And in this one, Mike Vizard is talking with Dr. Chase Cunningham, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Ericom Software. He recently put out a book, and so they discuss the book itself, and which focuses on how cyber attacks have become a threat to national security. And so Dr. Chase and Mike talk about the book and what organizations can do to kind of prepare themselves or protect themselves from cyber attacks, to not be a statistic, if you will. All right, that is a lineup today that is chock full of goodness, and we are going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, welcome back. We are kicking off today's broadcast with a conversation between Alan and Steve George, who is the COO of Weaveworks. They are going to be talking about GitOps adoption trends and the new Weave GitOps Enterprise, which is a GitOps platform that automates continuous application delivery and automated operational control for Kubernetes at any scale. This is a great conversation. This is about a great technology, too. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone,
Welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest this interview is Steve George, Steve's COO over at Weaveworks. We've spoken with Steve before. We've spoken to all the Weaveworks, not all, but many of the Weaveworks team. Hey, Steve, welcome back to Techstrong TV.
Thanks very much, Alan. Great to be here and see you and everybody again.
Absolutely. Steve, I love that background, and that's a real background. It's not like...
That's a real background, yeah. This is my, I did it by hand.
It's almost like a sauna.
I was going to say I did it by hand myself, but no, not really.
Oh, okay.
Somebody else.
All right. Well, you had me. Well, you were impressing me there for a moment, but okay, it still looks like good work, though.
It's fantastic.
Anyway, Steve, our audience, of course, knows Weaveworks, people behind GitOps and so much more. But for maybe there's a few out here who don't know Weaveworks. Why don't you give them a quick kind of rundown?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So Weaveworks is the company behind GitOps, and GitOps is an operating model for cloud native. So what does that mean? What it means is that by using GitOps, you can manage the life cycle of your clusters, of all the services that you're running on your Kubernetes clusters, and then the applications themselves. And the goal is to help teams to be able to go quickly by deploying applications, the latest versions, quickly and simply, using the tools that they know how to use, but also help them to deliver that reliably. So when there are issues or problems or challenges, you can always see what's running in the system by going to Git. And of course, you can return to an earlier point in time. So the last deployment that you know that was good, you can redeploy the entire cluster or redeploy just the applications. So you can always get back to a good place. And that means, fundamentally, you can go fast, but with that assurance of reliability underneath. So that's GitOps.
Absolutely. Very cool. And Steve, you, of course, are COO at Weaveworks. You've got a distinguished career in technology, and they could go to the Weaveworks About Us leadership team to get your bio. We don't have a lot of time today, and I apologize, but I wanted to jump right in to the news because it's some exciting news from Weaveworks. Why don't you share with our audience?
Yeah, so three big things from us right now. So this is our November launch of Weave GitOps Enterprise, and it brings together kind of something that we were talking about earlier in the year, Alan, actually when you and I spoke, and we had Philippe from Orange Business Services. We were talking about how to use kind of telecoms and to use GitOps and Kubernetes in a telecom setup, which is highly distributed. So one thing that we've been talking about, and we did a release with Deutsche Telekom, talking about how they're deploying 5G onto Kubernetes and how they're using GitOps for that. So that's sort of one area that's really interesting. And then we've been taking that knowledge and those learnings from our work there and putting them into our product. So that's our November release of Weave GitOps Enterprise. And this year, what we've done is we've split Weave GitOps Enterprise into an open source, freely available version called Weave GitOps Core. And so that's something that you as a sort of developer or DevOps person can get started with, download it, install it. It's just 2 steps to start using GitOps immediately to deploy applications into any Kubernetes environment. So whether that's local or you're using it in the cloud. And then Weave GitOps Enterprise, this is the sort of enterprise version, designed for teams and those in more complex environments. And that adds a set of capabilities about deploying a standard self-service platform. So that lets you define services, and then you can deploy those onto every single cluster. And again, that works with any Kubernetes environment. So those are the sort of 3 big things that we're talking about right now.
Absolutely. Let's dive into each of them, if you don't mind, Steve. Again, keeping in mind, I realize time's an issue, but let's examine each of them.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
What do you consider sort of? Well, let's start with number 1, the first one you said. Right, for our audience out here, these are technical folks. Steve, talk to them.
Right. So there's two things I think are interesting that are happening in the Kubernetes world and how they apply to 5G. So one thing is that we're seeing Kubernetes as a platform widen and the use cases for it become more sophisticated. So when you're in the 5G world, what you're doing is deploying applications which are sort of halfway between being pure cloud native and halfway back speaking to the older world of, containers and, VMs and some of the older technologies. And so what I find really interesting about this work is that we've been working with Deutsche Telekom and then one of the new 5G vendors called Mavenir. And what they're doing is bringing this cloud native vision to 5G and telecoms. And I think how this applies to us generally is that one thing is kind of we're seeing these different sorts of workloads come to the Kubernetes world. And then for somebody like Deutsche Telekom, when you're deploying many, many applications, many, many systems, you want to manage all of those. One of their sort of key people said to me, well, the key task for us is we don't want to have to send a human out every time we have to restart a service, right? Which is how we would have done it in the old days. And so you can sort of see that in the wider cloud native world. We want to manage the entirety of the life cycle of our software and services. And that's where we've been able to apply GitOps. So I think, for the general audience, what's interesting about this is the kind of, we're going to see more workloads coming into Kubernetes over time. And then this challenge of how to manage all those workloads, clusters, environments, and fleets is going to continue to increase as we, use it more widely.
I love it. Love it. Interestingly, though, Steve, I'm actually working on a story I was working on now around, how intertwined open source and CI/CD DevOps is, right? And really, when we look at it, in many ways, GitOps, I don't want to say it's the new CI/CD because it truly isn't, but it's the new home of CI/CD. Fair?
Yeah.
And and of course GitOps is inherently based on Git, which is open. I mean, but it's open source bona fides, it's open source heritage, whether it's pure open source or what have you is there. And then we start looking at sort of next gen like 5G. 6G they're starting to talk about, but let's stick with 5G. A lot of us don't even have that yet. And we look at sort of this march to the future, right? Yeah. Because here's something I've observed and learned over the years. The future doesn't happen like in a revolution with a snap of a finger. It's very evolutionary. What is it someone says, the days are long, but the years are short. Is that a saying?
Right.
Or did I make that up?
I'm not sure if you made it up, but it's a good one.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? So we look at, okay, we moved from kind of regular CI/CD to doing CI/CD in Git and doing all of this in GitOps around open source. Now we're combining that with 5G, which look, it's still taking baby steps, quite frankly, in much of the world. And it's more on promise than it is on reality right now in many ways. But one day soon we're going to wake up and full-fledged 5G is here, right? Full-blown 5G is here. And at the same time, GitOps is integrated into this, allowing us to kind of really do some of the amazing, quote unquote, revolutionary things, right? That we've been promised.
I think you're right that things take a while, though, right? That's the interesting part of this problem.
But do they really take a while? I mean, in the big picture, what's a while? Is a year a while? Is 3 years a while?
Okay.
I mean, certainly, that's why I say the days are long. It seems like it takes a while.
Right.
But, we live in internet time. We want everything now. We want it yesterday. We're not going to wait. But really, a while is relative.
Yeah, I think it's interesting working with enterprises like Deutsche Telekom and some of the larger enterprises, and it's a little bit of a different stream than, when we work in the CNCF or, at KubeCon and so forth. For these businesses, they already have these existing investments and systems and processes. And I think, I mean, I'm not a telecom specialist, but one of the things that strikes me when I talk to the telecoms teams is their absolute commitment to reliability and availability. I mean, they really are trying to deliver something which is going to be available for really, really high numbers. And so I find it really interesting that, as you said, I think for us in the cloud native world, we're really talking about GitOps and CD being about this extension of the deployment and operations phase. And so I think working with a company like that, it's really interesting. Their timelines are much longer, their demands are much higher, for this sort of availability and capabilities. So I find it, a positive symbol for us in the Kubernetes world and the cloud native world that somebody like DT can consider us really seriously and work with us really closely. But I do think there is a truth there that you're pointing to, which is that new application platforms and new technologies take a long time to actually flow through. There's plenty of enterprises still struggling with CI, let alone thinking about this continuous operations world. And so, one of the reasons why we made Weave GitOps Core available is that to try and make it easy for people to get started with an opinionated form of GitOps. So you don't have to make any of those decisions yourself. That's not to say that you can't make those decisions later when you're informed. But I think one of the real challenges for when we're all working on new technologies is for everybody has something they're not that interested in from a technology point of view. They just want to use. And how do you do that if you don't want to invest all the time researching the CNCF and researching GitOps? And so Weave GitOps Core is designed to just get you started easily, simply, get the power and benefits in an open source package, to bring up your foundation about open source. And then you can, go from there as you explore it more widely and deepen your knowledge from there.
Agreed. So, everything's available. This is all available now, yeah, or?
Yeah, everything's GA. So Weave GitOps Core has been available for a little while. It's now on the website. You can go download it from GitHub. It's moving really quickly. It's a public project, so we're interested in feedback. So we're really excited to hear how people are interested in it. And our enterprise product is fully available as well. The new version is fully available. So really looking forward to hearing feedback from people and doing demos over the next period of time. We were at reInvent, so that was great fun and getting some input there, but also looking forward to hearing what people have to say going forward.
Absolutely. Steve, we're almost out of time, but here's something, and if this is too much like throwing a curve at you, I apologize, just say so, we'll skip it. But as you mentioned, there are people out there who are still struggling with, basic CI, organizations who maybe were a little late adopting, right?
Yeah.
If they're out here watching right now and they say, I'd love to get started, and this is open, and it's from an industry leader, this might be the ticket for us to do it. Let's talk, give them 3 steps on how they can get started using the Weaveworks solution. What should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
beyond just download, right?
But before download, sure, yeah. But the higher level issue, right? I think the higher level issue is really to be, committed to working on containerized applications and on Kubernetes. I think that's really critical, and that is a long path and one that you have to invest in and be, curious about. I think really my advice to everybody is to find an application or something within the company or organization that you can get behind as a kind of example, as an exemplar of how to work in a cloud native way. And then, get to that simple production environment, that simple setup as quickly as you can. I often talk to enterprises who've kind of trying to go from 0 to 100 in one massive leap. And I always try to encourage people to just start with applications, because that's the real proof of the pudding. That's why you want to really take on Kubernetes as an application platform, so you can deploy faster, do it more reliably. So have that exemplar, start there, and then learn lessons. And obviously, I'd be very delighted if you use Weaveworks technology and GitOps along the way.
Sure you would. Steve, we're about out of time, man. As always, it's a pleasure having you on. Come back and visit us. Keep us posted. We were talking off camera. I'm still fingers crossed that 2022 will see us on the road somewhere on the same time at the same place, and we'll do something in person. Okay?
Thanks, Alan. Cheers.
All right. Oh, wait, Steve. For people who do want to download it, though, what's the website?
Sure. weave.works/download.
Got it. Hey, man, thanks very much, Steve. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Steve George, Weaveworks here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, Devsec Ops, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have a conversation between Alan and Pradeep Padala, who is the CEO of Filament. This is a conversation that took place over at the KubeCon LA 2021 event, and they discuss low-code technology and whether it's being built for developers or for citizen developers. There is a difference, folks, and it is a great conversation that they discuss both of them. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. Oh, wait. Oh, we're live, right? Okay. See the difference between doing these live and not.
Yeah.
We're back here live at KubeCon, and I'm looking at the right camera, I hope. Pradeep, I didn't mention to you, but if you want to address the audience, you can look at that camera.
Oh, I can directly look at here.
Or we
Hey,
can
guys.
look at each other. But we are here in LA. It is KubeCon, and it's live, and things happen. We've got Pradeep Padala here. Pradeep is the CEO of a company called Filament, and they've got some news they've just announced here. For those who follow Techstrong TV, Pradeep was on our show, I guess it was about
A
2
few
weeks
days
ago.
Yeah.
Well, we filmed it by the time it
Sure.
played. You're
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And we had a good talk a little bit about what Filament is about, what he does, and actually, we also spoke a bunch about your background, Pradeep.
Yes.
VMware and,
Right.
and so forth. But for not everyone saw that, as much as I'd love for them to. But
Sure.
why don't we start there, if you don't mind, a little Filament background.
Yeah, of course, Alan. And first of all, thanks for having me here.
My
Good
pleasure.
to see everyone in person. It's very exciting to be here, meeting some of the old friends and new friends as well.
Yeah, it's good to see old friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very quickly about me, I started a company called ContainerX about 7 years ago. We built a container management platform. As we were just talking, I've seen containers and Kubernetes from the very beginning of like when it was just getting popularized, getting into production. So then we sold it to Cisco, then we started Filament. So we are focusing a lot on SRE automation. But we built a very cool workflow automation platform where you can build workflows without writing code, what people call as no-code automation.
Right.
So we are very excited about that. Happy to chat more, and would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about low-code automation.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I had the opportunity last week. My friends from Appian, and I spoke to another couple of folks from Mendix, a lot of the people in the low-code, no-code space. And one of the, not controversies, but like a fork in the road for low-code right now is, do we make low-code for developers or people who traditionally code anyway, but by doing it in low-code, it makes it faster and easier for them to do it? Or do we do low-code solutions for people who really don't know how to code, citizen developers, right? Who are going to use that to kind of, not bypass, but speed up the process.
Yeah.
Where does Filament, what road are you guys on there?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we started, that is one thing we were really thinking about. We are targeting engineers, SREs, who can write code, and we want them to write code. I think of Filament as a low-code platform where we are helping write the glue code, because people don't like writing glue code for integrations,
Right.
all these, building these workflows and so on. They want to write the business logic. I gave you the example of Facebook outage, where when the outage happens, there is a lot of glue, like checking certain services,
Sure.
checking DNS in this example, but the final fix also like takes multiple steps. So we want the developer to figure out what to do, but when you do it automatically, we want computer to do that for us. And you brought up a very good point on Zapier and Trade.io, many other companies doing this low-code automation for a non-tech user. I'm really excited about that. That's great to have. We are finally helping non-tech people use software as well. We're trying to apply this to more software engineer or engineer personas. I think that there is a great opportunity there as well. There are many companies doing that. So we want to expand on that. But for an engineer, we also want to provide debugging, analysis that is not there for a non-tech user, especially if you look at Zapier and other products. So those are some of the differences that we see for our customers.
Excellent. Good stuff. All right. Let's talk Filament 2. Is it Filament 2.0, right?
Yeah, Filament 2.0. Yeah,
That's exciting,
very exciting.
right? Because a lot of people out here have never started a company, right? They've never, you start a company and you get your 1.0 out, right?
Yes.
And 1.0 doesn't come out the first day. There is a whole process getting to 1.0.
Yep.
But then you finally get 1.0 out. And it's your child. It's like your first child, right? And then you realize, though, no one wants to hear their baby is ugly. But you realize, I didn't think of that, or we should have waited a little more and gotten that in there. And, this works good, but it would work better if we had this too. All these little things. And then you say, okay, we'll catch it in the 2.0. 2.0. 2.0 will be the rock solid killer, right?
Yep.
Is this one the rock solid killer?
It is. It is the rock solid killer. It's ready for production. So 1.0, when we started, we had this early inkling of no code, low code automation, but now we are production ready. We have 50 plus integrations across Datadog, Splunk, Slack, ServiceNow, and we support all cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and GCP.
Really?
So that's what we have accomplished in last 9 months. We released our 1.0 in December. We got early feedback, acted on that. So we are now fully production ready across multiple clouds, many integrations. Any workflow an SRE wants to build, they can build it today with Filament. So that's what we're trying to do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so you announced it today.
Yeah, so we are going live tomorrow, but we are talking to people still in person.
It's available
It's
tomorrow.
available right now. It's
right now, because we're live right now.
Yeah, so if people go to our production website, yes, it is live 2.0. But our website is going live tomorrow with more updates, exactly what are the new updates and all. But yeah, we can announce it right now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I had a hard time last time. It's 2 Y's. So it's FYL, Phil,
LLA,
LLA,
MYNT.
MYNT.
Yeah, filament.com with 2 Y's.
That's exactly it. And you can download 2.0 now. But if you wait till tomorrow, there'll be more documentation and more background.
Exactly.
Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
It's exciting. Let's talk a little bit about KubeCon. As you mentioned, your history is in containers. You've been to almost every KubeCon.
Yes.
In the last 6-7 years. Actually, I don't know.
It's been 7-8 years. Yeah. In the very first KubeCon.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, this one is certainly different.
Yeah.
But I think we're all just so eager to be back.
Yeah.
Different is good.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't replace this, like talking to each other in person.
Yeah. You can't. Yeah. And at some level, we almost fooled ourselves, right? when COVID first came out, we were like, oh, we could do Zoom. We could do Zoom, no big deal. It's the same thing. There is a world where Zoom is okay, but not for everything, and it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think people are starting to realize that. I think we're seeing it in virtual event attendance and webinars and so forth. People are fatigued over Zoom. And
Yeah, Zoom fatigue is real.
they want this. So it's been great. Walking around, they've done the Linux Foundation, CNCF, have done a really nice job of
great job.
spacing out so you don't feel like you're on top of everyone. We're here, obviously, without masks on. Everyone here's had to be vaccinated. Everyone here got tested. And once we go out from our little broadcast booth, you wear a mask.
Been pretty we wear a mask and it's pretty comfortable.
I was just going to say, I feel comfortable. I'm not, I feel safe.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're never totally safe in the world, but I feel like they've done everything a reasonable person could do here.
Yeah, exactly. They've done an amazing job, like spacing everyone out, and also
I give them lots of credit.
we had to give them a lot of credit.
Absolutely. All right. Pradeep, anything else we want to add to this?
That's pretty much it. Filament 2.0 is out.
Check
you
it
can
out
try it right now.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow we'll have more stuff coming as well.
You could try it out and then get more tomorrow. All right, man. Hey, I appreciate you coming down. It's a pleasure to meet you in person instead of on Zoom.
Yeah, of course.
Check out Filament 2.0. It's available right now on the website, or you can grab it tomorrow as well. We're going to take a little break here from LA. We have a few more sessions going on today. You can join us.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker Podcast. This one is a part 3 of a 3-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with Kevin Thomas, senior software engineer in test over at Blue Vector, which is a Comcast company. And they discuss all the cybersecurity things, including hacking and cybersecurity and grassroots efforts around cybersecurity and so much more. As always, it's a great conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
I think that's why I made such quick advancement in cybersecurity. It was the fact that I've never taken a computer course. I had to learn the things by myself and through my own discovery and really trying to understand, like to try to get to where I thought everybody else was, because I put everybody else up here because they had all these degrees and they were so smart. When they talked, it was just so elegant. I was so rough around the edges, and I thought, man, I'm gonna have to work my ass off to catch up to these guys. And I did. I really tried hard. And, I still think that most of the industries up here, I may be like right below the top. And I think that comes with a little bit of imposter syndrome, as well as, I just don't have those qualifications. And I think it's such a horrible thing that we do to people in the industry, is require them to be this or be that. Why can't we just accept for, what they do know in their mind? Because to me, I can take somebody who doesn't have a degree, who doesn't have tons of hours of college in computer science, and make them a great hacker or a great defender, just based on how they think. And because really that's all it takes, is being able to understand how they process and how they troubleshoot. I remember I went to a interview in Redmond for Microsoft, and it was for a position that I was actually going to be a supervisor and a manager of code scrubbers. So they would do the code scrubbing. They would give it to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think it's ready to go and be released, or should we put it back in production? so I'm thinking ahead of time, going, oh my God, I've got to learn all these things. I've got to make sure I know this operating system inside and out. I really feel like I'm at a deficit here. So I fly up there, and I go to the first interview, and the lady's sitting in a room, really cluttered room. I mean, her office was shit. I mean, there was stuff everywhere. And she asked me a question. She says, I'm thinking of an object in this room, and it's your job to figure out what that object is by asking the least amount of questions. And I thought, what the fuck have I done? I've sat there and pored over these books for months trying to get ready for this, and it has nothing to do with what they're asking. But I think that's the beauty in it. Like companies like Microsoft and Google, they don't care what certifications you have. Yes, it's a requirement, but they're more interested in how your mind works. And I think that as an industry, we've completely lost that. We look at, we're getting very binary. We're looking at if you don't have a degree, if you do have a degree, if you have a cert, if you don't have a cert, it's either on or off, 1 or 0. Life's not like that. And the internet is definitely not like that. The temperament of the internet is definitely not on or off. It's chaos.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think we're equipping the industry for the right type of defender or the right type of scientist. I think that, we're falling behind in that. And I don't know what the answer is. We supposedly have a skills gap, but I think the real skills gap is the hiring process. I don't think it's the actual people. I think it's the requirements. And I preach about this all the time when I look at an entry-level job that's posted and they want you to have all these certs, they want you to have all this experience. And this is for an entry-level job. Like, what happened to, why don't you come on and spend 90 days learning what we do, and we'll let you go and see how you do. There's no more of that. They want a for sure answer. Can this job be completed by this person? And, failure is part of success. And I think companies have forgotten that too.
So let's break that down a bit. So let's say I'm getting a degree, whatever degree, and a series of certs. So it's a degree and series of certification. So I get the training to make sure that I pass these tests. I may learn, I may not. Who knows? I don't know. You may learn, you may not. Who knows? But once I get to that threshold, I sit my ass down on the couch comfortably, open up myself a big bag of nachos, and I'm just going to town, and I'm watching people like you struggle, looking at people like me saying, I should be, I'm not saying me and you, but I'm talking in general. Right. You've achieved this, you should be this. There's an arrogance that comes with that, and there's a hunger that comes from humility. And you're right, because it's the people that are out there struggling to try to get to that level, and they're going through non-conventional means.
Yep.
They're going to be thinking differently. They're going to be forced to act differently and manipulate differently and evolve differently than the person that was given a certain track. So the person that's in job A and you're trying to get to job A as well, you may not get there because you didn't play that game. And ultimately, this person's getting their ass handed to them in the job because they aren't thinking creatively anymore. Or maybe they never thought creatively to begin with. Today and going forward, we're going to be dealing with drones that are going to be delivering packages, not people. It's unfortunate. We are going to be dealing with drones that are going to be assassinating people. We are going to deal with automated weapons and automated personnel of who knows what that looks like. Automated vehicles that are going to, the future, like it or not, is going to be very, very different. It's going to be very, very technical. But if we're going to start thinking about a defense, we have to start thinking creatively on how we can get creative solutions to that. So, just try to, without getting into a long lecture series, I just wanted to point out that mindset. I am like you. We're hungry to learn. I want to learn. I want to keep learning. I'm hungry to learn. I'm humble. I want to keep learning. I don't know everything. I get into a new situation and I'm overwhelmed, and I admit it.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to learn, and I want to think creatively. when I'm looking at a challenge, I'm thinking about music, I'm thinking about art, I'm thinking about all sorts of shit that, may drive my mind here or there. But, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's very similar, that kind of thing. Oh, maybe that's applicable here rather than just staying on focus and checking off boxes. I don't know if we're going to get there, Mike. I don't know. I don't know how or what we do to fill the engineering gap. But a lot of it is in hiring, and people don't want to take a chance on someone that's an unknown.
Right. Or not orthodox, they're unorthodox, right, and they come from a background that may have a challenge or hurdles. One thing that you pointed out, the drone, I actually read about the UK is going to have the first driverless drone to transport people from point A to point B. And it's like a helipad, and they're building it in London in Canary Wharf, which was like not very far from where I was living. And they're so far ahead. Like I just, when I see that, and I'm like, I remember when I was a kid watching the Jetsons was my favorite cartoon as a kid. Yeah. And I remember the cars and the robots and all this shit. And here it is, 20 years later, and I'm like, man, this shit's really happening. Like my dream cartoon is coming real. Like it's becoming real. I watched a show today. I may have downloaded it or pirated it. I won't admit to it though. But it's called Free Guy, and it has Ryan Reynolds in it, and the whole gist of the movie was they were in this game. It's sort of like a Sims game, and all these players were focused on killing all the NPCs, the non-player characters, right? And this non-player character was AI and started developing feelings, developing this thought of, hey, I don't want to be an NPC. I want to be a player. I want to live. And so he fought against the game maker. It was brilliant. And I spent like an hour and a half watching. I was just like, I can see stuff like this happening down the road, and I think we're at a very exciting time for the industry and for the world in general. I mean, the internet brought us closer together, whether that is dangerous or good or bad or indifferent or all the above. It brought us closer together and made things easier. But at the same time, it's forced people to become more intelligent. It's forced people to develop quicker and develop skills that we never had to have before. And no telling where it's going to take us. I think it's really exciting. When I look down the road, I hope that I'm alive when cars are no longer touching the ground. Like that's what I want to see. But like you said, it's going to take that creative mind. It's going to take people like Elon Musk, the non-orthodox, the crazy rich with a wild sense of imagination and creativity to create that environment. If you would have told me 10 years ago that we would be talking like this through a computer, or maybe 20 years ago, if you'd have told me that I was going to be talking to you through Zoom and we were going to record this, I would have told you you're fucking crazy. And I'm sure the rest of the world would have too. But now look what we're doing. It's amazing. So I just think it's really exciting. And I think that, this conversation has really hit home with me as the force of creativity and innovation. And without creative minds in the industry, we're going to get stagnant. And I think we're getting to that point because if you look at the defense mechanisms that we have, they're not a whole lot different than the first IDS. They have a couple bells and whistles and algorithms thrown in there, but it's still the same type of product. But we need more creative minds in the industry to push us even further.
So I'll also go into this as when we started the conversation about how refreshing it was to meet all of you and be a part of this. This is a community where people that are new into this can come in here and ask questions and not be afraid of being judged. And this is what I'm interested in. Point me in a direction, and we're not going to chastise you or whatever, and you're free to go forward. Mm-hmm. I think these kind of things, like what you've developed, Mike, with Kim, and it's a real, genuine grassroots movement of technology. It is not, I don't begrudge corporations trying to make a living. I mean, God bless them, but it's a genuine space where someone can come in and feel like a family member and being able to grow and share. And I don't think you see a lot of this. I think you see a lot of groups that are either trying to sell a product or a byproduct of a corporation arm, but they're not a genuine grassroots movement from a technological standpoint. So I think there's great value in what you have. And I'm hoping others will join us so that they can come in and, again, not integrate with us, but expand us, share the knowledge, share some crazy fucking ideas that might be radical or insane, whatever.
Exactly.
But, maybe we all learn from it, and maybe we become better, and maybe we then can say we are this group that thinks very differently. And we start talking about real life events and publishing them. And people are like, fucking people are crazy. But then they were right. I'm gonna go check this out.
Exactly. It takes that craziness to really innovate, right? So my two idols in the world, one's dead, one's out in left field somewhere, but Einstein. People thought he was mad. People thought he was insane, but he was the most brilliant, And I have an actual painting on the wall of Einstein because when I walk into my flat, I like to be reminded that, hey, at one point people thought he was nuts, but now we look back and go, man, he was like shit, And my other idol is Elon Musk. Yeah. As crazy as he may be, as off the wall and eccentric, he knows what he's doing. And he's doing it from an unorthodox standpoint and an unorthodox method, but it's fucking working. And people, what I found really interesting with both of them, right? Elon Musk, people have tried to tear him down his entire life, right? Discredit him, try to get photos of him smoking weed with somebody, things that humans are fallible. Humans make mistakes. Humans act like humans, but they tear those people down, even though that they're brilliant minds and they're innovators. They are what keeps us moving in the right direction. But people get so sidetracked with shit. And that's what kills me about the industry is, when somebody gets compromised, a company gets compromised, we're not looking at, and I hate to say this, and it may sound bad to companies, but some of these attacks are beautiful. Like the way they're orchestrated. You just have to sit back and admire it. When I was doing an IR and one of my friends called me up and he was working on the same thing. He said, you'll never believe this. They actually went to the Nimble and was encrypting the Nimble. Like, I was like, that's beautiful. Like, there's not, I just had to laugh. I was like, okay, well, it's a new game, Yeah. But I don't think that everybody looks at things the same way that I do, or maybe that you do, or whoever. But I think we need to understand how people look at things and try to relate instead of tearing people down. Try to relate and try to evolve as a group. So that's the thing too. So when you mentioned two people, Einstein and Musk, two things they had in common. We talked about checking off the boxes and sitting on the couch and being comfortable and stretching out and life's pretty good. I am the shit. Neither one of these individuals, as powerful and as influential as they are, what do they do? You look at Musk. He's up at 4 a.m. He has a ritual of learning, humbling himself, continuing to learn, continuing to progress. Stay on target, stay focused, keep learning. Einstein, again, same thing. Keep developing, keep fighting with Niels Bohr and his colleagues, but keep running the race. Long distance runners rather than sprinters. Yep. Two things they had in common: dedication, humility, wanting to keep learning and being creative. And that's very hard because most people want to be able to, unfortunately, check off a number of boxes, sit back and just let the love flow. But this ain't the business for it. No, I know for myself, like if I had to recreate myself, I don't know how many times, I would have that 9-to-5 job, making 180 grand a year. Yep. And then something would happen in the industry or with the company or with me, and I would have to start over again. But I've always found it interesting to be able to start over again. Like this job, I took a huge pay cut go into this job. But the people I work with, there's no way that I could find the same people ever in one place. And the job itself is super interesting and challenging, right? So I'm learning something new every day. I'm running a blue team at the same time helping out the red team and doing incident response. Like, it's everything in one. And to me, that keeps me going. And I think another thing too that makes people successful is the fact that they don't look to master something. They don't accept the fact that they've mastered or they're an expert in something, because there's always so much more to learn. And I try to study everything widely, right? Not just defense, not just offense, not even just cybersecurity. Right. I still do art and I still mess with electronics, music. And to me, when you're learning with everything across the board, every little principle that you're involved with seems to get better and you seem to advance. So I think that the industry is really interesting, but I think the people are what make the industry interesting. And I think the grassroots and sort of the, I hate to say it, it's kind of like a 60s fuck the system type attitude that actually makes shit work.
Kim mentioned something in chat, it's their art. So I think going back to some of the things we talked about, when the enemy is putting together an attack, it is their art.
Art of war. Yeah.
And they know our rigid structure. And they take great pleasure in exploiting that because they don't have those bounds. They are artists. Yep. But none of us think of it this way. We think of, they're going to do this and you should expect this and you should expect nothing.
Right.
Expect nothing. Go into every challenge expecting nothing, looking at what the facts are. Not being blind that, this looks like a familiar pattern. Let's just keep going down. No, think about what this may actually be. Again, I keep going back. I think there's hope. And I think there's hope because of groups like ours, and hopefully we'll have more of these like we had at the annual celebration. We will. In bullshit, share ideas, be crazy, be stupid, be inspired by each other and think differently. I think, again, this is the beginning of how we actually combat this in a real way.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think that, you brought up the 1-year anniversary and how we all got together. And that's something that I think that, it was awesome. And I think when I first got involved with like DEF CON used to be that for me. DEF CON used to be that place. But over time, it's become so commercialized. It's become so, I guess, mainstream that it lost that original, genuine feeling to me. And I think that we were talking during the anniversary. Maybe we'll put something on. Maybe we'll do a haunted conference and just do it. Here in Chattanooga or wherever. Yeah. And just get together and brainstorm and just build shit. And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy like learning what other people are doing, their research projects and asking questions and why they're doing it. I think it's so important to have that camaraderie, but in a non-commercial, non-corporate manner, because corporations and the industry puts things in boxes. And I'm a round peg and you can't shove me into a square box. So I need to be somewhere where I feel free and I can create. And I think a lot of people are like that. But yeah, I think it's going to be exciting for the group. We've gone through different revisions and rebuilding and restructuring and trying to figure out where we're headed as a group. And I think that just this conversation alone has really given me a lot of insight into my own thinking and where I think we should be going. And it's going to take people like us to go that direction. It's not going to be, the people that are handing out certs and stuff like that, or corporations. I think it's going to have to be, people, actual genuine people. But dude, I appreciate you being on the show. Like, it's been a blessing. This conversation we had, I think that I've been wanting to have for a long time. I'm glad you were the person to help me with this. I love your ideas, and I think we should have some more offline chats and see where we can take this.
Definitely.
So
I want to thank you and Kim for really welcoming me, and I'm excited to be part of the family, and just keep pushing the bar forward.
Absolutely.
What the hell happens?
Yeah. So before we go, is there any questions you want to ask me or about what I do or about the group or anything in general?
I think I'm just really excited to see where we're going to go. Right. I want to see us grow as a family and how we can get others. Like, I take it back to the beginning of our conversation where they were so frustrated in an interview. Like, you're trying to challenge me on things that I've never been trained on. I'll learn. I'm not lazy. Just point me in a direction. Let me, how do I learn? Right. I think a group like this, if we can continue to get our name out there to people that want to get into this industry, invite them in, let them tell their story, let them feel comfortable. That builds confidence. Then they grow. We learn from each other. I think, honestly, that's the solution, Mike.
Absolutely. I think letting people be themselves is key, and understanding that people, we're all human. We may think differently. We may come from different backgrounds. We may not make everybody happy all the time, but we're still humans, and we still have the same goal. Nothing changes. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to more conversations like this in the future. And that's it, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kim. Talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon. All right.
Take care. Bye.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got the Something Old segment. This is from the recent Cloud Native Days with Kubernetes event. This is a presentation by Donovan Brown, who is the Partner Program Manager at Microsoft. He is speaking about microservices made easy, getting started with Dapper, which is distributed application runtime. It simplifies cloud-native application development, and it is a great technology, and Donovan does a great job of introducing us to it. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Cloud Native Con. I'm Donovan Brown. Today, we're going to be talking about how to make writing microservices easier with an open source project called Dapper. No matter what industry we are in, writing software has common patterns. We reduce costs by using the resources we need and only scaling out when additional resources are required. Applications are being broken down into units of functionality, each exposed as a service. We want to focus on adding business value and not managing infrastructure. So we leverage serverless platforms and use DevOps best practices. And the number of programming languages seems to never stop growing, and we should use the best language for the task at hand. On the surface, microservice development seems simple. It's a micro or small service, not this big, giant, scary monolith. However, there are limited tools and runtimes to support distributed development. And many of the frameworks are tightly coupled to a language or development stack. A typical microservice application might look something like this. Several small, purpose-built services all talking to each other. Some of the services also talk to external resources to store state or ingest events. Getting an application like this up and running and keeping it running has proven to be challenging. To address these challenges, the cloud native community has developed Dapper, which is a set of building blocks to ease distributed application development. The goals are to take years of experience and best practices and make them easy to use from any language and on any stack. It is driven by standards and provides a consistent, portable, and open API that can be extended and used in any cloud and on the edge. Dapper is community-driven and completely vendor-neutral. At its core, Dapper is a set of building blocks, including service-to-service invocation, state management, pub-sub, bindings, and secret management, with support for the actor model and observability out of the box. You can use as much or as little as we like. If we have already solved service-to-service invocation, but need help with state management, we can just use the state management building block. Or, if we're starting from scratch, we can use it all, allowing us to focus on adding business value. Any language that can send an HTTP or gRPC request can use the building blocks. Not only can applications that leverage Dapper use any language, they can run on any infrastructure. Dapper is implemented using the common sidecar pattern, where a second process runs alongside our main application. The main application uses HTTP or gRPC request to call into the Dapper sidecar to take advantage of the desired building block. Here's an example application with two services, A and B. Notice each of them also has the Dapper sidecar. When service A wants to call service B, Dapper does all the hard work of discovering where service B is and securing the communication between the services. If retries are required, Dapper takes care of that for us. This slide also shows the pluggability of the component model. Without having to change our code, we can change where state is stored, where events are published, where secrets are stored, and even where our telemetry is sent. When developing locally, we can use a Redis container and swap that out when we move to our cloud platform of our choice. The components are where the magic began with Dapper. Switching from Redis to Cosmos DB or from RabbitMQ to Azure Service Bus requires no code changes. We just update our configuration and our code stays the same. If we don't see a component we need, they are all open source, and we can add whatever we need by submitting a pull request. At this point, let's focus on the different building blocks and demonstrate how to use them. Let's begin with service-to-service invocation that lets one service call another. When one service wants to call another service, it must know the address, the port, and the number of instances that are running. The service could be running anywhere. Dapper takes care of locating and securely calling the service and even handles retries and back-off logic for us. With a post request, we can ask Dapper to invoke the new order method on service A, and Dapper takes care of the rest. Observability gives us tracing across all the services in our application. With Dapper, we can configure where we want the telemetry sent. This slide shows the same information visualized from Application Insights and Zipkin. As a developer, we don't have to write any special code. By running our application with Dapper, we get this for free. What I'd like to do now is show you a demo on how to get started with Dapper. First, I want to show you the docs site at docs.dapper.io so you know how to get started. Simply click Getting Started and then click Install the Dapper CLI. This page will show you instructions for installing on macOS, Windows, and Linux. Now that you know how to get started, let's see some code. I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio Code, where I'm inside an empty folder. To get started, we're going to create a new web API using the .NET New command. What's cool is we can Dapperize an application without changing a single line of code. We can start to use Dapper immediately by running our application with Dapper. With this command, we are giving the service a name, telling Dapper what port the app runs on, what port we want to access Dapper on, and how to start our application. Dapper will build and start our application, and then launch the sidecar and wire everything up. Switching to a web browser, we can still access the application on port 5000. This allows us to incrementally adopt Dapper, because all existing clients can still access the application on its original port. The real power starts when we have a client that uses Dapper to access the service. If we access the service via Dapper, the results are the same. But notice, we are now using Dapper on port 3500. This will never change, even if we change the address of the backing service or the number of instances. This is saying, hey Dapper, we need you to do something for us. We don't know the address of the other application. We don't know where it is on the network. We don't even know how many instances there are. But we know its name is my app, and we need you to go invoke the weather forecast method. Dapper locates my app and securely calls the weather forecast method for us. But wait, there's more. Because we're using Dapper, we are getting observability for free. Switching over to Zipkin, we can query all the telemetry Dapper was automatically collecting for us. We can see when calls were made, how long they took, and what services were involved. We can drill in and see detailed information. Without Dapper, we would have to write code to get this information. This information is invaluable when you need to debug a problem, and we get it for free by just running our application with Dapper. Now I'm going to stop the application and return to the slides to discuss more building blocks. Next, let's examine state management, which allows us to create long-running stateful applications. With a post request, we can store key value pairs into any supported state stores. To retrieve values, we can use a GET request with the key. And because components are pluggable, we can switch from Redis to Cosmos DB without changing our code. To build scalable, distributed systems where we react to events, publish and subscribe is a very powerful way to accomplish this. Dapper supports both publishing and subscribing to events. The application does not have to take any hard dependency on a particular implementation or SDK. We can swap out Redis in this example for any supported PubSub component. Dapper also supports input triggers, which enables our code to be called when a specific condition is true. For example, call our code whenever a tweet is sent that contains a specific string. Output bindings allow our code to write to external systems without taking a hard dependency on any implementations. And finally, secrets management gives us a consistent way to access connection strings and other sensitive information in our applications. Now let's pick up where we left off and add some of these building blocks to our application. We are going to pick up right where we left off and start using some of the other building blocks. To do that, we add the Dapper package to our application. This is an optional step, as the Dapper functionality can be accessed via the built-in HTTP client of any language. Adding a Dapper SDK will make using Dapper feel more natural in some scenarios. We're going to add 3 lines to the startup.cs file that will enable dependency injection and PubSub support. First, we add a call to add Dapper on line 29 to enable dependency injection of the Dapper client class into our code. Next, we instruct our code to use the Cloud Event Standard, which is a specification for describing event data. This middleware will unwrap requests that use the Cloud Events structured format so receiving methods can read the event payload directly. The final line of code adds a Dapper subscribe endpoint that allows us to subscribe to events with attributes. With just 3 lines of code, we have everything in place to turn this into a stateful, event-driven service. Let's add some new functionality to this service using Dapper. Out of the box, this code generates random weather data. In a real app, this data might come from events published from weather capture systems. So we're going to add code that gets run for each event and stores the data. Let's open the weather forecast controller class and add a post method to receive the events. We don't need a special route, so we can delete this code. We're going to accept the original weather forecast business object and return it when we're done. To have this code called each time an event is published, we can use the topic attribute. This tells Dapper to watch the component named PubSub, and when events are sent to the new topic, call this code with the data. We get the name PubSub from the component definition. When we initialized Dapper, it created a default PubSub and state store component. Let's open the PubSub component. This component is named PubSub, which is why we used it in the attribute. On line 6, it shows this is configured to use Redis. Later, we will move our code to the cloud by defining new components. We also have a component named StateStore, which we will be using next. Let's close these and return to the code. Thanks to the call to add Dapper in startup.cs, we can use dependency injection to get a Dapper client. With the Dapper client, we can start using the building blocks. Calling SaveStateAsync, we can store our weather forecast object in our StateStore. The first parameter is the name of the component. The second parameter is the key, and the final parameter is the data. That is all the code it takes to respond to an event and store it. Instead of returning random data, we want to return the data we just stored in the StateStore. To demonstrate incremental adoption of Dapper, we will not change the return type of this method. As we did before, we will use dependency injection to get a Dapper client. Next, we replace the code and return a list of weather forecast objects from our StateStore. To retrieve state, we can call getStateAsync, passing in the component name and key. Because this method is not async, we return the result, and we're done. We should test the code to make sure it works as expected. So let's set a breakpoint on lines 40 and 31. Let's generate the assets to build and debug our code. Next, we use the Dapper extension to take our launch configuration and start our Dapper sidecar whenever we press F5 to debug. We will use the .NET Core launch configuration. Let's name our service My App, and we can keep the default port of 5000. What this did was create a new configuration based off the .NET Core launch configuration that can start and stop Dapper for us. Let's select the new configuration and look at it. Notice, this configuration has a pre-launch task that starts Dapper. Because our service has no UI, we can remove the lines that start a browser. Now, we can see there is also a post-debug task that stops Dapper for us. Let's close this file and press F5 to start debugging our code. In the terminal, the extension is running commands to start our application and the sidecar with the debugger attached. While the code starts, let's open an HTTP file with requests we can use to test our code. The first request uses Dapper to post an event to the new topic of the PubSub component. Sending this request, we hit our first breakpoint. We can have a great F5 experience even with a Dapperized application. Let's press F5 to continue and send the GET request to read from the StateStore. Just as before, sending the request, we hit our other breakpoint, so we can step through our code. Pressing F5, we see the output is the weather forecast we stored. Now that we know the code works, let's stop it and move our code to use resources in the cloud. Because we're using Dapper, moving from on-prem to the cloud is as easy as defining new components. In the Azure Components folder are definitions that use Azure Service Bus for PubSub and Azure Storage for our StateStore. Notice the names of the components are the same as our original components, so our code does not have to change. We just need to tell Dapper to use the components in this folder instead of the defaults. We do that in the tasks.json file that was created by the Dapper extension. We just add a line that tells Dapper to use the Azure components instead. With that change in place, we can press F5 to start debugging. When the code starts this time, it will point at the components in Azure. We can use the same HTTP file pointing at localhost and port 3500, but our components are now in Azure. Let's start by running the GET request first, which should return null as we are no longer pointing at the Redis running locally. Sending the request, we hit our breakpoint as before. Pressing F5, we get null back as expected. When we send the post request to publish our event to the new topic, our other breakpoint is hit. Finally, let's run the GET request again to confirm our weather forecast was saved. The weather forecast returned was read from Azure Storage. Let's jump over into the Azure portal to see the value in our storage account. Using the Storage Explorer, we can navigate to the weather table and see the item. This demo shows how easy Dapper makes it to turn any service into a stateful, event-driven service and move it from your dev machine to the cloud. The community momentum around Dapper is incredible. We released 1.0 in February, and we submitted it to the CNCF in March. It is also great to see the support from organizations around the world. You can use any of these links if you want to join the community. You can also follow us on social media. There's also a great ebook available for those who want to dive deeper. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope to see you building incredible cloud-native applications with Dapper.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at the relationship between DevOps and open source. This was written by our own Alan Schimmel, who lays out a pretty persuasive argument that at the heart of DevOps is CI/CD, and CI/CD is all about open source. In the early days of DevOps, Jenkins was the platform by which CI/CD was delivered, and as an open source project, it is hard to argue with the success of Jenkins. Driving a lot of that success is the Jenkins plugin architecture. There are literally thousands of plugins that allow Jenkins to work with just about anything. And now a whole host of CI/CD tools have risen to fill the gaps in Jenkins. Some are open source and others are based on open source. But it's not just CD. Open source has become the dominant software development foundation in observability, OS, cloud, and more. We are living in an open source age, that's for sure, and the pace of innovation is such that technology is constantly improving, and we are all better off for that. And we look at Devsec Ops for databases. Devsec Ops adoption is increasing as more and more organizations realize that the traditional separation between DevOps and security is wasteful and dangerous. As a result, they are working to integrate security into all of their software development processes. Adding security to containerized applications, cloud resources, and other parts of modern DevOps infrastructure is already well understood. But what about databases? Databases were always and remain a critical system component and a prime target for attackers. This article looks at the basics of modern database security and offers ways in which to create a continuous security process for databases in a DevSecOps organization. In news, Iterative has added an experiment versioning capability to its open source platform for managing machine learning operations using GitOps workflows. The latest version of the data versioning control platform makes it easier to save, compare, and reproduce machine learning experiments at scale without requiring organizations to set up an additional repository to track them. Instead, organizations can store those experiments alongside other software artifacts in a Git repository. As a result, IT teams will no longer need to try to keep track of experiments using spreadsheets or notebook tools such as Jupyter. The DVC platform makes use of a Git-like interface to enable organizations to track multiple versions of data sets, models, and pipelines across an MLOps workflow. That capability is extended to make it easier to manage the experiments data science teams create during the construction of an AI model. Interesting stuff. All right, over on Container Journal, we have the latest from Tigera, which is adding real-time intrusion detection capabilities with the latest release of Calico Cloud and Calico Enterprise platforms that enable secure networking between Kubernetes clusters. In addition, it has added dynamic packet capture for troubleshooting microservices. In addition to providing integrations with the Panorama firewall management platform from Palo Alto Networks to enforce access control policies. The intrusion detection capabilities being added to the Calico Container Firewall are based on the signatures that are made available via the open source Snort project. The Tigera platforms themselves are based on the open source Calico project and are designed to be either deployed by an internal IT team or accessed via a software as a service platform. And we take a really close look at the difference between Docker and Kubernetes. They are the two most widely used tools in the modern cloud-native container ecosystem and have enabled the container revolution to thrive, thanks to the utility they provide and the openness of their communities. Though often used together, Docker and Kubernetes accomplish different goals. The difference is foundational to understanding how modern containers are built, deployed, and managed in production. Cutting to the chase, Docker is about building individual containers, while Kubernetes is about managing and orchestrating large numbers of them. That's about as basic as it gets. Luckily, this article goes beyond basic to compare Docker and Kubernetes, explore their respective architectures, and consider the benefits and drawbacks of using each. All right, over on Security Boulevard, Apple has warned that the Pegasus software developed by Israel's NSO group is being used to compromise iPhones. A number of individuals, including 11 members of the U.S. Embassy Kampala mission, have been hit by Pegasus. NSO Group had pledged to terminate its sales and support to customers that were abusing its software, but it has yet to identify those customers, including those behind the compromise of U.S. Department of State personnel. Telephone numbers with the U.S. country code of +1 supposedly are blocked from exploitation by NSO Group's Pegasus software. So the question remains, who is the NSO Group customer targeting U.S. interests? This article takes a deep dive into the NSO Group and its actions thus far, including the expectation that there are far more victims than those identified so far. And finally, the Linux Foundation has made the Cyber Investigation Analysis Standard Expression, or CASE, a community project within the Cyber Domain Ontology effort. CASE is an ontology-based specification that makes it easier to aggregate data and analytics generated by a wide range of cybersecurity tools. The goal is to make it easier for organizations to correlate the data generated by a diverse range of security tools to reduce the time required to ascertain the root cause of a security breach. The CASE project launched in 2014 as a collaboration between the Cybercrime Center created by the U.S. Department of Defense and MITRE. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is an arm of the U.S. Department of Commerce, also contributes, along with the Netherlands Forensic Institute, the Italian Institute of Legal Informatics and Judicial Systems, FireEye, and the University of Lausanne. All right, that's it for the headlines. I'll be back with you on Monday with a fresh new batch. Until then, I hope you have a great day, great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Gil Rappaport, who is the General Manager of Access Management over at CyberArk. Gil, thank you so much for getting on Techstrong TV and having a conversation with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Great. So I'm familiar with CyberArk, but maybe not everybody is. So can we start out by you telling me a little bit about CyberArk and what you guys do?
Yes, of course. CyberArk is a public traded company. And for the last 2 decades, we really invented and focused on a privileged market, what we are calling the PEM market. And we are the leader of this market. And as of last year, we expanded and we acquired identity solution as well. So right now we are leading the market with our identity security solution, which is a combination and convergence of our privileged solutions and identity solution.
That's great. That's great. So you are the perfect person to talk with me then about it seems like kind of a dark spot in cybersecurity programs within a lot of organizations, and that is user activity and sessions associated with web applications, and the fact that a lot of organizations just don't have visibility into what their users are doing with respect to web applications. And interested in finding out from you what you're kind of seeing in the space right now, and whether this is a big problem among organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, with a lot of us working from remote and the adoption of a web application, that it brought flexibility and increased the productivity for organizations, but it also implemented a lot of security concerns, security control that are necessary in order to mitigate the risks out there. So CyberArk focused for many, many years on the privileged users. Mm-hmm. But if 10 years ago, privileged users was equal for IT users, today also a lot of the business users have access to very high-risk web applications. So the same type of controls that CyberArk is doing for many years for the privileged users, right now we want to do it for all users, for all applications. Maybe not needed for all applications, but definitely for those high risk or sensitive applications, organizations today needs to put more controls and more security layers in order to protect those applications and the users.
Yeah, so I read a statistic, and I can't remember the exact amount, but I did read that going into 2022, that insider threats are one of the biggest, if not, well, I guess it's one of the biggest concerns among C-level executives in their organization, the risk of insider threats and credentials and just stealing intellectual property. And this seems like it would be kind of a no-brainer for organizations to be able to want to recognize and understand what their employees are doing with respect, especially with these more sensitive web applications. So do you think that because of remote work and the pandemic, the way that it's kind of shifted the way everything happens, not just where we work, but also how we work, do you think that that's kind of jump-started, if you will, or kick-started this need for greater visibility into these web applications and employee usage? Or is this just something that's been kind of growing and becoming more important over the last couple of years?
It's absolutely. It is related to the fact that you have less control once you have users working from remote. So the problem itself and the required visibility, what the users are doing, it's growing. And I can mention that we were running a global survey with 900 security professionals, and we found that 80% of organizations experienced employees that not just misused, but also abusing their access to business applications in the past year. So 80%, wow. It's a lot. And they are almost on a weekly basis. They need to go and to look and to find evidence or looking for what was going on, what went wrong for specific sessions and specific usage of web applications. And again, it's not always malicious activities and insider threats, but a lot of this also related to mistakes and errors that the business users are doing and creating a lot of problems for the organizations.
That's a good point. And I imagine also that this also can be helpful in understanding or discovering when there has been some sort of credential theft going on, because if an employee is tagged as abusing their credentials on a website, but there's actually no, there's a footprint, but it's not actually that employee, I imagine then obviously that's a case of credential theft. So how much of this activity is actually because of credential theft?
It's a percentage of the activity related to this, but once again, it's also I cannot mention the name of the company, but one of the companies that are right now is looking for this type of solutions. One of the employees was doing something. He thought that he is doing this on a test environment. He did something in production environment and took the system down for a couple of days. So this is, again, it's malicious activities, which is you want as an organization, and the security responsible for in the organization to have the visibility in order to know who is doing what, but also for the mistakes and the errors that users are doing, even if it's no intention to create any damage, but still you want to track and to know exactly what was going on, to get notifications on bad behaviors and so on.
So tell me a little bit about the technology that you guys have that helps organizations have that visibility.
Yeah. So what we are CyberArk, I mentioned before, 2 decades already working around security. So when we entered and right now leading the identity security space, we are doing this with security first in mind. And this is where we launched last week, the identity secure web sessions. And what it helps for enterprise to gain visibility for the user activity in the web-based applications, and enable the organizations to know exactly on the click level, exactly to what the users were doing. But we are doing this in a very smart and flexible way that you can search. You can search for among all the activities. You can find in a matter of seconds exactly what was happening in specific application, in the context of the activity, and so on. So we in this solution, the secure web sessions, we are adding 3 layers of security for a web application. So the first one is a recording of the sessions, but again, it's not a video recording. It's done in a very smart way and efficient way. And also we implemented the continuous authentication and re-authentication. So again, based on the context of what's going on, for example, if the user is walking away from his very sensitive session and leave the session open unattended, we definitely want to re-authenticate the user and to make sure that the right user or the authorized user have access to this application. And the third layer is the session protection. So session recording, session re-authentication or continuous authentication, and session protection, that we can actually protect this sensitive session from any unwanted activities. Again, if it's by mistake or intentionally or malicious activities for this web application.
Very, very cool. So is this kind of a browser-based technology, or how is it actually within the infrastructure?
Yes. The design, and it's implemented through a browser extension. And it is one of I came to CyberArk. I'm a co-founder of a company called Vifinity. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I sold my company. And the name of another product that CyberArk is marketing, it's called the Endpoint Privilege Manager, so EPM. So we integrate these new solutions with our endpoint solution in order to provide the best secured solution. So it is browser-based solution, and we are providing a lot of security layers in order also to protect the solution itself.
That's great. I'm curious also in hearing your thoughts on as we move hopefully beyond the pandemic, although it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. But and we kind of establish these new ways of working, whether we're fully remote or in a hybrid working environment. How does that impact the way organizations approach cybersecurity, understanding and recognizing that their employees are going to be working at least part of the time away from the office? Do you think that kind of changes their mindset about cybersecurity and the devices and the networks and locking them down? because we all know that traditionally the corporate networks corporations have not really, security's not been. They haven't been liable for security for the employees' home networks or home devices. So how do you think that's going to be changing, if at all?
I think it's already changing, and I think, and we are a big believer. We are one of the leaders in what we are calling the zero trust, zero trust approach, and it's going to stay. Even if employees will go back to the office, most likely most of the organization will do it in the hybrid way. But it's not like people will go back and will put the network as the parameter. It's going to be digital transformation and SaaS applications and access to web application. All of this is going not just to stay, it's going to continue and to grow. And for all of this, you need this zero trust approach, which means that every session, every user, you want from the beginning of the session to identify who is the user, what he is doing, is he authorized to do what he is is trying to do, and so on. And again, this is exactly the type of solution that I believe privileged and identity, or what we are calling the identity security. This is exactly the best framework to address the zero trust requirements. So from our perspective, we are adding those new layers of security, and this is exactly what we did with Secure Web Sessions. But we are doing this in a very friendly way. You cannot today add security and to start to compromise the experience of the users. You need to do it full transparent for the users. Today, user experience is the most important things. So you need to find the very smart and right way to add security layers while not interrupting the end user experience. And this is exactly what we are doing here with Secure Web Sessions, adding those security layers to the web applications, full transparent to the users. They are not going to notify that the security layers protecting them, protecting the organization, but still for the security professionals, they are getting those new tools in order to make sure that everything is working smoothly and everything is protected while the users continue to be productive as the organization wants them to be.
Excellent. And I wonder also if we're going to see, because of this new way of working, if we're going to see security being approached in a much more thoughtful fashion, because I firmly believe that we've up until now, a lot of organizations have really taken that kind of afterthought approach to cybersecurity, and every single time there's a new threat or a new threat vector, that we just add kind of another layer, we bolt something on. So I wonder if we're going to organizations will actually become more approach cybersecurity from a much more holistic point of view, and create a security environment that is, quite literally soup to nuts, but it's not a collection of, all different things kind of bolted on, but there will be kind of just like an umbrella that kind of overlays and with different components based on what the organization is looking for. And your technology sounds like it would be perfect for such an environment, because it's very, very necessary, obviously, with the increase in insider threats, but also it just makes good sense for an organization to have that level of visibility. So I firmly think that this is the type of cybersecurity solutions that organizations will be seeking out in the years now and in the future. So good stuff there, Gil. I really do appreciate your time today.
So just to maybe to summarize around this, the secure web sessions, this is exactly how we were building this. It's a framework of security layers, and with our frequent releases. And we understand the dynamics in the market, and every other week there is a new methods or new way that the security threats are growing and changing all the time. And this is why we did it in the way that we are adding security layers on top of web application, but in a way that it's very dynamic. We are releasing new layers or new functionalities and new features in this framework in order to make sure that if something is changed in the market, there are new security threats and so on, that we address almost immediately or providing to our customers the type of protection that they are expecting. So again, and
it seems like an easy way to do it. Yeah, it seems like a pretty easy way to do it too. That's great. That's great, and I'm sure organizations appreciate that as well. The more that we can take complexity out of cybersecurity, I think the better off everybody will be. So
yeah, this is the name of the game, to make it easy to look easy for behind the scenes. Our developers and the security labs, they are working very hard to find the best technologies, but for the users, definitely full transparent to keep their experience, and for the security professionals to make it look like it's out of the box immediately. They are getting the benefits, and we are keeping the complexity in our ends and progressing all the time.
That's great. That's great. Well, Gil, thank you very much for walking me through the topic of user sessions and visibility and user activity and as well as your new technology. Thanks so much. I do appreciate your time.
Absolutely, and thank you very much, and keep doing this great job that you're doing.
Thank
excellent.
You. That was very kind of you. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Theo Zafirakos, who is the CISO over at Terranova Security. Theo, thank you so much for being on Techstrong TV with me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene. Glad to be here.
Great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about ways in which organizations can build a much more cyber resilient security posture and also increase their cyber or security awareness in general. But first, before we dive into that conversation, I wonder if you can introduce us to Terranova Security.
No problem. Terranova Security is a global security awareness training provider. And we have also been selected by Microsoft as their partner of choice to deliver high quality and the best in security awareness training for their customers. Terranova Security has been operating since 2001, and we have delivered security awareness to over 10 million cyber heroes in over 200 countries in 40 different languages. We're based in Canada, but operate and have clients globally, and we're celebrating our 20th year anniversary this year.
That's great. That's great. Congratulations. 20 years. That's pretty impressive. So let's talk then about what you guys are seeing in the space, especially with regards to security awareness. I know that's been a huge issue, especially over the last 18, 19 months during the pandemic. And I feel like every conversation I have on Techstrong TV goes back to the pandemic. But we've seen so many changes occur with organizations, and not just the way that they do business, but the way they deliver business. And cybersecurity has been an issue for many, many organizations simply because we've got this new way of working. So have you noticed that with with clients that you're working with now that there is kind of that heightened security awareness, or do you think that a lot of folks are still kind of plodding along doing what they always did with little regard to security?
Yes, and it has evolved over the 20 years. Back in 2001, our founder, Lise Lapointe, had a vision that there was a lack in cybersecurity awareness among employees. And we continue to see that even 20 years later. What has happened and what has brought this to the surface in the last, I would say, 18 to 24 months is the pandemic and the work from home environment, where a lot of employees had to become a lot more independent. A lot more services went online due to the pandemic. More people start working online, doing schooling online. Well, entertainment and shopping has been online for a while, but now even more medical services are online. So the more we've transitioned to an online and digital world, we've been exposed to a lot more threats. So it's not to say that we cannot work or operate online, but have to do it in a secure way. And what happened in the last, I would say, 18 months is that organizations were focusing on becoming operational in a remote workforce, and their employees were not necessarily trained on the best security practices. So now it became even more a challenge because I had to train my users that work remotely, but I also had to think of a different set of challenges and threats that my users face at home. Right? When you're working from home, you are the administrator of your home environment, right? I no longer have an IT department that is going to secure my network and my home environment. I have to do it. So how do we do that? How do we do that properly?
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And it, I feel like as we become much more of a digital environment, as so many more things are online and available to us online, that we've not done as a society, we've not done a good job of keeping up with letting folks, educating people about the threats that exist in the cybersecurity land or in the IT landscape. And I think that so many organizations didn't really put a good emphasis or a big enough emphasis on security within the four walls of the organization. So their employees just kind of took it for granted. And now during this time when folks are working remotely or they're in a hybrid environment, they're now tasked with having that level of awareness that they didn't have before. And I wonder if you guys are seeing, what the reaction has been from employees as they've kind of shifted to this new way of working. Do you think that they're willingly becoming more aware of cybersecurity, or are they just kind of going along the way that they've always gone and just kind of continued to, I don't want to say ignore it, but just not really consider it a major priority for them?
Yeah, exactly. And that culture has been in the making for many, many years. Other organizations will call their users their weakest link. I like to say it's the most neglected link because we haven't paid as much attention as we should. We've invested in technology, we've invested in firewalls and technical controls to protect us, but less attention has been given to the users. So the user has adopted this, it's not my problem, it's not my responsibility attitude, right? It's the IT departments. But attackers, knowing that, have shifted their attacks, and now they're targeting users a lot more often than they're targeting technology. So now organizations rely on their users to be the control point. So when all my technology fails and this phishing message reaches the desktop of my user, well, he becomes my control point. Now he has to make the decision whether to click or not to click. So users are focused on being operational, being productive. They do not have time for this, right? And they could be less bothered to take the training. So that goes back to establishing a culture that information security is everyone's responsibility. So when I talk to a new client that tells me, well, we can't motivate our employees to participate to the training. Well, I ask them what kind of culture have you established to begin with? Is there a top-down approach? Do you communicate to the users from day one when they come in within the organization that information security is important? The other aspect that we see also is that we give users a computer and technology. We expect them to know how to use it safely. Well, That's not really fair, right?
Right.
So we have to take the time to train them as well.
And but building that culture of awareness and security takes time, and I'm not sure that organizations have that much time to be able to devote to it, especially those that have traditionally just kind of left security up to the cybersecurity team to take care of, and not really built in that awareness with their employees. So, what are you seeing, or what are ways that organizations can at least kind of get the ball rolling on creating a much more cybersecurity aware organization, and regardless of whether it is an employee base that is working remotely or working in a hybrid environment or working actually on site at the company location, because it seems like it's a big rock to push uphill.
Yeah. And we see that because the Information Security Awareness Program is not a one-person responsibility. It's not a one-team responsibility. A lot of times, because the subject is information security, it falls in the lap of the IT or the security department. But they're not experts in training, awareness, and especially educating adults. Right. So we always recommend to have a sort of a cross-functional committee, because an information security awareness program requires input from a lot of stakeholders. Right. If my employees are in an operational role, how are they going to take time away from the day-to-day to complete the training? Right. If we commit users and we ask them to take mandatory training, that's more of an HR responsibility, because now we're asking them to take away from their regular schedule to complete the training. And who's going to apply consequences for non-participation, right? IT is not going to go chase and not necessarily punish, but apply consequences for non-compliance. Again, that's a management and HR issue. So the first step is organizations need to establish a cybersecurity committee, or at least a cybersecurity awareness committee, include the right stakeholders and the decision makers to make this program a success within the organization. Once you've done that, then you can start prioritizing on what are the objectives of my program. What am I trying to achieve? What are the key messages that I need to deliver to my users? Right? Whether they're working from home, whether they're on site, whether they're on hybrid mode, whether they're hands-on with technology, or they're hands-on with personal information of employees, or clients. So we'll identify the topics, and then we'll determine, okay, well, what is the best way to reach out and deliver this message?
That is such good advice, and I don't see a lot of organizations. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't see as many organizations doing this as they should be, but I do recognize that overall awareness of security has increased over the last year or so, and I do believe that organizations are doing what they believe is level best in helping to or doing what they can to secure their networks and their data and keep their employees safe as well. But I do believe that there is still many hurdles to improving cybersecurity awareness and building that cyber resilient organization. I think that we've got a lot more insight into ways that we can collectively, everybody work together to improve cybersecurity as a whole, and that includes having the government be more involved in cybersecurity efforts. But on an individual corporate level, I do believe that, to your point, we do need to establish some objectives and goals within organizations to achieve a level of cybersecurity awareness, because without having that awareness, there's no way that you're ever going to have a cyber resilient organization. So that's my 2 cents. That's it's certainly something that has become a regular topic here on Techstrong TV, and I like you, I do see some things changing, some things improving, but we still have a long way to go, unfortunately.
And it takes time.
It does take time. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So, Theo, thank you very much for your insight on building a cyber resilient organization and increasing cybersecurity awareness. And best of luck with your organization. Sounds like you guys are just going great guns, and congratulations on that. And I wish you luck, and hopefully we'll have another conversation again in the future.
Thank you for having me.
So,
have a good day.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Polly Mitchell-Guthrie, who's the VP of Industry Outreach and Thought Leadership over Kinaxis. Polly, thank you so much for being on Techstrong TV with me. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So I wonder if you can introduce us to Kinaxis, first of all.
Sure. We are a supply chain planning company headquartered in Ottawa, Ontario, in Canada. We have more than 150 customers around the world, and we really pioneered the technique of concurrent planning. And let me explain what that is. What this means is in a supply chain, most supply chains operate in silos, supply planning different than demand planning, different than capacity planning, et cetera. And what we do is we take the entire network into view, the entire supply chain network, put that data in memory. And so everyone across the entire network can see what everyone else can see. What it also means is that if there's a change in one side, your raw materials are stuck on a boat in the Suez Canal, it's going to automatically trigger the corresponding changes in the rest of the network so that you can see, for example, what's going to be the impact on on-time delivery with a delay like that. No run button, it's available right away. And we all know that right now, knowing information sooner so you can act faster is critical to a supply chain. Latency causes instability in a supply chain.
Yeah. And obviously, this has been a very hot topic of discussion lately, especially as we're getting into the holiday season, and people are realizing very, very quickly that supply chain isn't just about technology components and cars and refrigerators these days. We're talking about so many different things along the supply chain, and it's really fascinating to me how many people are now quote unquote experts in supply chain because this is happening. It's like, oh, really? So you've known about this all along. And but it's, pretty much it's kind of how I measure things. If a lot of people are talking about it, like people who never would talk about it, then it's a big thing. It's like ransomware and supply chain. Those are like the two biggest topics of 2021. It seems like, but beyond the pandemic, of course. And in these conversations that people are having, there have been a lot of kind of side conversations about whether things such as just-in-time manufacturing is really something that organizations should still be doing these days when obviously we're recognizing the failures and such. But it seems like there should be a better way for organizations to approach their supply chain management. And obviously with the advances in technology, specifically artificial intelligence and machine learning, it seems like this is something that really in today's age, we really shouldn't be dealing with as it shouldn't be as big an issue as it is. So where have we gone wrong? I guess that's the question that's on everybody's minds.
Well, I don't think there's a singular answer to that question. So it's a complex problem. It's a complex series of solutions. But one of the things I'll say is that even the example you raise of just in time illustrates the fact that it's really hard to wrap our heads around what's going on here. Just in time, the way we think about it is about the fact that it reduces the resiliency of a company if they don't have enough material on hand. Just in time is actually designed to do a lot more than that. It's not just about cost. It's really about an overall quality system. But what it has really raised for us, what's really behind the just-in-time issue, just-in-time is getting blame. It's not necessarily just the problem. The problem is focusing just on cost efficiency in a supply chain and not on resiliency. A supply chain needs to be able to be designed to be able to handle a disruption. And in order to handle disruption, you need to have agility. Agility is something that gives you better resiliency. It's a competence you need in order to have resiliency. Lots of ways to get to resiliency. Agility is one. Having transparency. When I talked about concurrent planning, the line that I like to use about that stuff stuck on the boat in the Suez Canal, if you have some visibility alert that tells you your stuff is stuck, that's a start, but you can just admire the problem if you just keep getting alerts that tell you your stuff is stuck. You actually need to know what is going to be that impact across my whole network so I can ask what if questions and figure out what my alternatives are. When the boat was first stuck, we didn't know whether it was going to be stuck for 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. And so being able to figure that out and what am I going to do about that and what are my alternatives is critical. So having more robust information helps us make better decisions. And AI is certainly one way to do that.
Yeah. And you mentioned transparency. And I think that one of the things that has really kind of exacerbated the situation with the supply chain shortage is just the fact that folks don't really know what, a lot of times what we're talking about. Like I just ordered a car about a month ago, and my dealer said that it's going to take at least 6 weeks before it even enters production, and then after that, and it's a Mini, so it's not anything really like super fancy. But then I had one before, and the one thing that I really liked about it was when I ordered it, they would give me an order number and I could log on and I could see where it is in the process. And that to me was a really great thing. That helped me kind of gauge when I could, expect to see it. But right now we don't have that level of transparency, and consumers don't really recognize or understand that when we're talking about supply chain, it could just be one little thing or maybe two little things that back up the entire process. And I wonder if we really need to kind of start educating consumers on the kind of the ins and outs of the supply chain and how one little thing can have a cascading effect on the entire process. And so do you think that that's something that we really should be doing? Is that level of education, or do you think that this is just kind of a point in time, if you will, and that this is, in the grand scheme of things, this too shall pass and we'll all get back to the way things used to be?
I think some of the kinds of behaviors, so even the fact that you ordered a car, that's a newer behavior. I ordered a car many years ago from Ford, and it was pretty unusual to do that at the time. The automotive manufacturers are moving to much more of a make to order, just like you are doing, because of the challenges with lead times, and they can't afford to put vehicles on the lot when they don't have enough parts for it. So that's one example. I bought some hiking boots several months ago, and there was a sign up at REI that said, we may not have all the inventory you want because we're having supply chain issues. So I do think that consumers are becoming more and more aware of supply chain in general and the impacts on them. But what they may not recognize is that transparency issue that you're talking about. So for example, when it comes to your car, you may be aware we see all these headlines around the chip shortages. So semiconductor chips can indeed slow down the creation of a vehicle. But another example of something that's a cascading effect that is not obvious to the average consumer is magnesium. Magnesium, China mines 87% of the magnesium in the world. They've slowed that down right now. It's very energy intensive to extract. And so they're having an energy crisis. They're slowing down their extraction. If there's not enough magnesium is used to make steel and other materials and aluminum. And so if you don't have those raw materials, those are several tiers down in your supply chain. You're not going to be able to make everything you need for a car or construction materials or many other things. So those are some of the kinds of impacts that, again, are just not as obvious. But that's why we believe concurrent planning is so critical to help you understand if I can't get the aluminum or something is stuck somewhere, what's the lead time going to be? We have an approach we use using machine learning called the self-healing supply chain, where we've heard a lot about lead times being up right now, increased, and they are certainly increasing. You talked about the challenge of one bolt, or one part being missing from, say, a car. A car has over 30,000 parts. If one bolt is missing, they can't start the car. So how do you manage the lead times for all those parts? And even if you don't manage, even if the Ford or the GM or the Fiat don't manage all 30,000 parts because they deal with multiple suppliers, they can't manually manage the lead times across tens of thousands of parts. So they make assumptions. They assume this bolt and this screw are coming from the same supplier. They're going to have the same lead time. And they enter that into the system and they sort of just make those assumptions. The problem is those assumptions are usually wrong. We started working with one customer as a pilot on this and discovered that their lead times for their particular world were off by more than 50 days. So that's a big change to be off by. And you can imagine the cascading effect of that on planning. So we use machine learning to look at what historical lead times have actually been, not what the planner assumes they will be. Predict a lead time based on using machine learning based on the historical record. And then we let the planner say, okay, if it's just a fairly narrow change from what I expected, if I expected it to come in 100 days and it's going to come in 105 days, automatically updating the system, because I don't need to touch that with my hands. I've got too much to do. I'm managing hundreds, maybe thousands of parts. But if it's going to be 150 days, that's a big change. Notify me so I can figure out what to do about that and make an alternate plan that can make us more secure. So trying to figure out, how do we manage these disruptions? How do we automate the obvious so we take the tedious stuff off a planner's plate and let them spend their time on the challenging problems, like what am I going to do about the fact that this one supplier, because we can also use machine learning to find patterns. Maybe that supplier is having lead time challenges across multiple parts that we rely on them for. So this is one way where we're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to improve the efficiency of the supply chain.
So do you think that we're going to see an increase in organizations really kind of digging into their supply chain and where they are sourcing materials and start to come up with, maybe alternatives to what they're using today, not just from a manufacturing perspective, but also in that planning perspective, and basically paying more attention to their supply chain in general, so that, if this happens again, and who's to say that it's not going to happen again in some way, shape, or form in the future, do you think that companies maybe are taking steps now to be better prepared for the next time that this happens?
Yes. And the first thing I'll say is that I can guarantee it will happen again. It might not be a pandemic, but in fact, researchers are saying that climate change is expected to have a more disruptive impact on supply chains than the pandemic. And so disruption is not going away. Volatility is here to stay. We've just got to figure out how to manage it more effectively. You talked about some things, looking at our suppliers differently. You also mentioned product design. Do we change how we design a product or manufacture a product? Really, companies are having to look at multiple steps along the way. Part of what makes a supply chain a challenge is that it is a chain. There are links in the process. So that you talked about procurement, one link in the chain. You talked about manufacturing, a product design, another link in the chain. There's distribution. So when you do a make to order with your car, that's a different way of how do we plan for what we're going to make? And then how do we get it to you? It's a change in the system. So supply chains are looking at all kinds of changes at multiple links in those chains, trying to figure out how can we move goods and information more efficiently through that chain so that we can be more resilient and able to handle disruptions that come our way. And what we learned, and I'll just close out and say what we learned in the last year and a half is that companies found where their weaknesses were. They found those weak links in the chain. And that's what they're turning around now and saying, okay, we were weak here, and here. This is what we need to address in our company.
And that makes sense. And I think that, our companies actually, the smart companies will actually use that to be their strength moving forward, because they will work on, those areas where they are the weakest and create a more robust methodology or way of doing things to improve upon those processes dramatically. And I agree with you that we're definitely going to be seeing more of this happening, and under many different circumstances, especially as we, the consumers being, consumers, we're going to continue to demand new products and goods and services. And so we're going to need to find new ways of procuring them. So, and I don't know if that means that more things are going to be sourced closer to the point of manufacturing, or if we're going to rely more on just in-country manufacturing versus out-of-country manufacturing, or if there's going to be something altogether different, if it's going to be made to order. It's who's to say? But based on what you guys have seen and the research that you guys have done, where do you see this particular supply chain shortage? Where do you see it easing out? Are we looking at well into 2022, or do you think that it's going to be shorter, or are we looking at maybe even longer than a year?
It's a good question. It's a little hard to answer, and I'll give you a couple of angles on why that's the case. One reason is that it varies significantly by industry, how much you're affected. If you're in the automotive industry and you're heavily reliant on the semiconductor chips, which they are, you can't get a semiconductor fabrication facility up overnight. It takes 2 to 3 years to build. So some of these have very long cycles to fix a disruption like that. On the other hand, we have to watch out for the bullwhip effect and the glut. If we make too many chips because we had a shortage now and then demand goes down and all of a sudden we have new capacity to make chips, but demand has gone down, then we can actually have a glut of chips. And that kind of effect is called the bullwhip effect. But the other thing I'd say is that changes happen. So I give guest lectures to students in universities talking about supply chain all the time. And one of the illustrations I give is in automotive, we originally started the pandemic with disruptions in Wuhan, China, the Detroit of China. Parts were shut down. It impacted automotive supply chains. And then on the demand side, demand went down because people were staying at home. They weren't buying new cars. And then the shortage shifted to chips because what happened is people started buying it. When they were all at home, they were buying all this consumer electronics, which used a different kind of chip. The chip company shifted to the chips they were making. And so demand went up for one kind of chip. It was hard for the chip companies to supply them. And then at the same time, on the demand side, people started driving again. They started leaving the house. They wanted more cars. And so even in just one industry, we've seen shifts in demand and shifts in supply in just a year and a half, pretty significantly. And so that's just one microcosm of the fact that the challenges are really what I sometimes like to call combinatorial. So it's really the combined effect. Even if you can take a chip and get it on a container somewhere, the containers are mismatched where we need them to be in the world. Get it on a container, get it onto a ship, get the ship to a port. We know there's blockages in the ports. The ships are sometimes 150 miles off coast waiting to get into the ports. Wow. Then we get it into the port and we don't have enough dock workers, stevedores to get it off the ships. And then if we can get it off the ships, we need to get it onto a truck, but we have a shortage in the number of truck drivers. And that's just one little piece of the problem. And again, these are cascading or combinatorial effects. And because of all of that, I would say as a general statement, I don't think we're coming out of this next month. It's going to be with us for a while, and it's going to depend on the industry you're in, just how severe or how long the tail is going to be of this particular disruption. But keep in mind, another thing I'll say is even within the midst of the pandemic, earlier this year, the storms we had in Texas, the winter storms, and combined with fires at petrochemical plants in Louisiana, meant that there was a shortage of resin used in making plastics, used in all kinds of materials, just like magnesium, something people don't think about. Those shortages had nothing to do with the pandemic. They were due to climate, a natural disaster, a fire, and just a storm. So those are going to keep happening, and we just have to figure out how to be more resilient in the way we run our supply chains.
Yeah, and we can't plan for when those are going to happen, but we can plan for those happening. So that's a really good point. And so it's a gift card Christmas in my house this year. So I've already warned people, if hopefully you're not really hoping for that PS5 because it's not going to happen this year. But
that's right.
So
that's right.
Anyway, but Polly, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I think that I think there's a lot of insight in this conversation, and I think it, if nothing else, it really will help folks understand exactly when we say supply chain issues. It's not really just an excuse. That this is a real thing, and it is happening. So, and unfortunately, there's no real end in sight. But we do have to act now to prepare for the next time. So, thanks again for your expertise and for your time. I do appreciate it.
Glad to be here today. Good conversation.
Great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. As I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are coming up in the next week and a half or so, so you can mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called How to Fail Fast with Test Intelligence in CI. This one is happening Friday, December 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Harness. the biggest bottleneck of software delivery in the software delivery process is testing. And that's because developers never compromise on quality. They want to make sure the new code is being merged, is working as expected, and old code still works. So how do we solve this friction? How can developers move fast without compromising on test quality and coverage? So this session will focus on the current state of testing in the build process, the benefits of a fail-fast methodology, how Harness built test intelligence, and the results of leveraging test intelligence in CI. That's going to be a great one. All right, the second webinar is called Autoscaling a 1,000 Nodes Kubernetes, Kafka, and Elastic Stateful Cluster. This one is happening Friday, also December 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace and Coralogics, I should say. The biggest challenge for your Kubernetes cluster is autoscaling stateful services. This webinar focuses on how to architect a Kubernetes cluster to meet the increasing demands of business in a stable and cost-efficient way. Now, from observability to autoscaling to architecture, attendees will learn some practical techniques that they can apply to their own infrastructure that will significantly improve stability and performance, as well as how to decrease cloud costs using practical techniques. Good stuff there as well. All right, the last webinar is called DevSec DevOps versus Devsec Ops. Which is the right approach? This one is happening Monday, December 13th at noon Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Flatora. Today's threat landscape is evolving faster than ever before, and in light of some recent high-profile breaches, it is evident that we need to begin to put cybersecurity first in software development. Sec DevOps and Devsec Ops offer the required security-first mindset and solve the need for rapid software changes that detect and plug security holes as fast as they are found, and continuously deploys innovative defensive solutions to keep bad actors off their guard. At the same time, we need a structure to organize and govern security implementations. So this webinar will focus on how value stream management can spearhead security-first initiatives when combined with a phased implementation approach. So the webinar will focus on understanding DevSecOps versus Sec DevOps, continuous security best practices, why value stream management is critical to continuous security, and how to implement value stream management for continuous security. Good stuff also. Three great webinars there. We've got lots more too before the end of the year. So do check the websites, DevOps.com, ContainerJournal.com, and SecurityBoulevard.com for upcoming webinars. And I'll be back on Monday with a fresh new batch of webinars. I lost my days there, but so until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe. All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we've got Mitch Ashley in his Analyst Corner. He's got two conversations today. The first is with Dr. Nick West, who is the Chief Medical Officer and Divisional VP of Global Medical Affairs for Vascular at Abbott. And they discuss medical device manufacturers and customer experience. Medical device manufacturers are increasingly focusing on customer experience, which is very important in the healthcare industry. If you don't know how to use your technology, you're not going to use it effectively. And that is what they're on about. So this is a great conversation between the two of them. And it actually kind of helps illuminate the importance of customer experience, no matter what industry. And then after that, Mitch speaks with the other members of the Techstrong research analyst team, Dan Kirsch, Judith Hurwitz, and they talk about the recent AWS reInvent conference. All three of them were there, and they talk about their impressions and their analysis of what went on at the show. So many different topics, including enterprise adoption, API security, increasing cloud competition, cloud stickiness, cloud reliability, and also the AWS Bug Bust contest, which got them in the Guinness Book of World Records. Good stuff there. Both conversations are very, very fascinating, so let's roll them both now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm excited to have returning with us Dr. Nick West. Dr. Nick West is Chief Medical Officer and DVP with Global Medical Affairs Vascular with Abbott. Good to have you back, Nick.
Very nice. Thanks for having me back, Mitchell. Very nice to be here.
Since you're here a second time, I can call you Nick.
By all means.
Okay, great. Well, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Abbott.
Great. So, as you say, you slightly stumbled over the rather mouthful of my title. Yeah, I'm the Chief Medical Officer, essentially, of the vascular business at Abbott. And so I deal with the medical side of things. I was an interventional cardiologist in my former life until 2 years ago. So I have some insights from the other side of the fence. I'm not just, although I now work for a large medtech company, my background is in clinical practice. So one of the things I think I'd like to talk to you about today is how we are trying to evolve our thinking and our position in the medtech industry around patient experience and the patient journey. Now, this is Abbott is a company, many of you will know, it's a global healthcare brand, has over 100,000 employees worldwide, lots of different divisions. So I work for the vascular division, which involves products for the coronary arteries, so things like stents, guide wires, imaging devices like our optical coherence tomography platform for looking inside vessels, but also endovascular, so treatments in the leg arteries. We have other divisions that look at neuromodulation for pain and the like, insertion of pacemakers, structural heart deals with valves, etc. We have many different divisions, heart failure I should mention also. So we have irons in many fires in the cardiovascular space in terms of medical devices. And as we move forwards, I think we all appreciate we need to be much more patient-centric. And so what we've been engaged in vascular is an attempt to map that patient care journey, much like a customer journey for other companies out there, and try and see how we can meaningfully contribute outside of just producing a device, no matter how good that device might be.
It's interesting, you know, all of us in many ways are gone through this process of thinking more holistically, thinking about a customer journey, to use that phrase. And also for devices, just drawing a parallel to the IoT device, you know, that world was very much a build it and forget it, right? Left the factory door, it got sold. We don't worry about updating the software. It just kind of goes where we replace it the next time somebody buys it. Now we live in a world where those things have long lives. Sometimes, you know, in case of those, they get used by maybe multiple people across its journey, and they expect some level of service, whatever there might be. Would you say? Now, I know you've told me that you have this kind of multi-year effort around beyond intervention that you have underway. What are some of the learnings you've already picked up about how you have to think about things differently, and maybe what are you looking to learn next in this process?
Thanks. That's a really great question. So just to frame it, this piece of work, this project we've been working on, as you say, it's called Beyond Intervention. Now, in the vascular division, all of our products, things like coronary stents, guide wires, balloons for both treating the coronaries and the legs, they are used only in the space of the cardiac catheterization laboratory, the operating theater, call it what you will. But of course, the patient's life doesn't begin as they get wheeled into the cath lab suite, and their life doesn't end when they leave the cath lab suite. And although we've been terribly focused on that relatively short period in the patient's journey, the Beyond Intervention initiative is exactly that. We're trying to look outside of that point of intervention and understand where the patients come from and where they go to. And exactly as you say, this is all about moving beyond just the tool, and not say the tool is a secondary item here, but how can we create a value add over and above that tool? Think about a service. Think about other tech companies doing something similar, and what can we bring to that table? And specifically, as I've mentioned, Abbott has a global reach in many ways, and it's trying to think out of the box, not only of the patient outside of the cath lab, but also Abbott, if you like, outside of vascular. How can we leverage some of the things from our other divisions to seamlessly integrate them into the patient journey and improve things? So our first year was last year. Our white paper is available on the internet. If people are interested, you can find it at cardiovascular.abbott, that's ABBOTT /beyond intervention. And we published just a white paper, and it states the findings of a large global survey, around 1,500 stakeholders, patients with either self-reported coronary artery disease or peripheral arterial disease in the legs, physicians who care for those kinds of patients, and also healthcare administrators. And we asked them to identify where were the roadblocks, if you like, in the patient journey across the entire spectrum. Now, it's important to point out that survey was performed before COVID, and we might have had different answers in the post-COVID era or peri-COVID era. But what we heard very loudly were the following points. I won't go into them in great detail, but number one, patients feel they do not get enough time with their physician, and they don't get a tailored, personalized vascular treatment. They go into a box that's labeled myocardial infarction or heart attack, and everyone gets treated the same. And everyone is slightly different. So that was the first thing. People wanted a tailored experience. Number two, patients and physicians admit there is a lack of interoperability and poor communication across the whole network. So we mean between primary care physicians, specialists, patients, but in fact, even between specialists, because patients often get asked the same questions over and over again. Their records aren't available, and that's a real roadblock to good care. And the third and most salient point we heard was that the biggest impact where data-driven techniques and novel tech could have the most impact in modifying the patient care journey was actually at the time of making a diagnosis and at the time of planning a treatment pathway. So not necessarily doing the intervention, but upstream, getting to a timely diagnosis and an accurate treatment pathway. So that was what we heard from year one. So that was a pretty clear message. So in year two, what we've done is we've focused on that upstream journey. We've drilled right down into what goes on, if you like, when people become patients. How does a person transition from a person with a symptom that they don't understand into a concrete diagnosis with a treatment plan? And bear in mind, this is still upstream of many of our tools. But our year two, again, we did a second large survey, nearly 2,000 patients, physicians and administrators, again, this time from 13 geographies globally. And again, some very, very interesting insights. And I think the first one, and the one that strikes me most of all, is that the patient experience and that of healthcare providers and administrators is completely out of sync. So when we look at how patients rate the way they were treated compared with how healthcare leaders, administrators, and physicians think they're treated, there is a disconnect. Mm-hmm. For patients with coronary disease, patients rate their journey the least good, but it's an even greater disparity for those with peripheral arterial disease. And we can muse on why that might be. Most people know what the symptoms of coronary heart disease are. Pain in the chest is a red flag. You go straight to the doctor. Patients with pain in their legs, they may not necessarily know what to do about the symptoms. They may not know what they mean. And that leads to a very disjointed care pathway. And it's not just medical literacy amongst patients, but also they complain that sometimes the primary healthcare providers cannot interpret the symptoms readily and don't know what the first and correct test might be. So that was the salient point, is that there is this major disconnect in experience. And before I tell you about the other three areas that we think can have the most impact to change that, I think it's probably important to dwell on the fact that if patients think they're not having a good experience, that can really color what happens downstream in terms of their outcomes. Mm-hmm. We all know that, okay, a patient's perception is not going to alter necessarily their risk of heart attack or limb amputation. But in terms of experiencing, understanding, and tolerating their symptoms, having the reassurance that they have a diagnosis, their doctor knows what's going on, can make the whole condition much easier to manage. And again, as we move into the 21st century, some of these, if you like, softer endpoints, quality of life, freedom from symptoms, ability to perform your job without limitation, go about your activities of daily living, may be as important or possibly more important to some patients than the hard outcomes that are so important to clinicians, like heart attack, stroke, amputation, even death. I mean, some patients, in my clinical experience, sometimes they're prepared to run the risk of not surviving a procedure because their quality of life is so poor that they can't go on further, and they would take that risk in order to feel slightly better.
Let me ask you, before we kind of get into what you think the next things. It's really fascinating. So, I have a parent who is a now retired physician. I think we shared a little bit about that last time. So I have a bit of an exposure to this. But one of the things was sort of the medical vendor, to use lack of a better term, and doctor relationship. That was, kind of who you sold to, right? You sold to the doctors, get them to use your products. At least that's part of it. I'm sure it is infinitely more complex than I'm describing it. But it's fascinating to hear you talk about, you could argue to say, well, all that stuff that happens up front, there's no medical device involved in that. That's not where your part of the picture is. That's the doctor's part. Why would you even be interested in that stuff? How did you make the decision or convince the right people, like, we have to back up before it ever comes to the surgical or other procedure? All of these things affect the rest of the journey.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think one thing I would say just before we start is that improving patient care and quality of life are very important, not only to me, but to Abbott in general. We are aware that there is consumerization of healthcare. Patients get a greater and greater say in how they're managed, or they want to be part of the decision-making. And so we need to be understanding of that. We need to be conversant with the issues and be able to see what we can meaningfully contribute to help that. And as you point out, traditionally, the relationship has been, we are the med tech, we sell to the hospital, the healthcare providers, the physician. But in actual fact, although they may be purchasing the devices, the end recipient is the patient. They're the ones who actually end up with the device. So we need to understand what their unmet needs are outside of just the device to really improve that overall holistic experience. So we're aware that there needs to be a more patient-centric focus. I like to rely on the WHO sort of bullseye, which they have on their website, which talks about patient safety. And they talk about putting the patient in the middle, and it's like the layers of the onion. If it is good, if you start for what's good for the patient, and I say this as a physician without being too ivory tower and utopian about it, but if you start with the patient, if it's good for the patient, it will be good for the physician, because a treated, satisfied patient with a good outcome is going to, quote unquote, bother the physician less. It's not going to require repeat procedures. No repeat procedures equals no consumption of resources by healthcare providers, which means a better ability to serve more people. And going one layer out from that, if whatever the tool or service that's offered together or in part is better for the patient, it becomes better for the medtech industry, because they will benefit from people using that device/service to treat more patients. So there is a good reason for Abbott to be involved in this and interested in this. And we're already seeing some very interesting insights and some potentialities for us, if you like, to interact along the care pathway.
Fascinating. Yeah, just hear you say the market dynamic has changed, right? The patient having much more of a say. You could say that truthfully about all of our society. So it's affecting everybody.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think gone are the days really of the sort of the paternalistic patrician attitude where doctor always knows best. We would like to think doctors know best most of the time. But again, actually our year one survey clearly identified that patients felt that data sharing would be very important. Data sharing would be important because it could augment their physician's knowledge. It would enable their physician to stay up to date and treat them as an individual better, and that everyone acknowledged that data sharing would be a good thing. The problem is that whilst everyone acknowledges data sharing is a good idea, it'll benefit them and benefit others, there's a significant minority, around about a quarter to a third, who still don't want their data shared. And there's that whole suspicion of what happens if we share our data, what's going to happen to it.
Well, in interpreting some of those studies, I've looked at a few. It's, you need to know the subject matter. So talk a little bit about where you're going next. Where you're hoping to learn in the next phase, or the phase you're in now.
Okay, so I won't go into it in massive detail, because again, if people are interested, if you go to that site I mentioned, you'll find this year's white paper is also for download. And I'd say you don't have to pay for it. It's completely free. And it's written in as conversant a style as possible without being too technical. And we've got some great commentary on both white papers from both physician stakeholders, but also this year we've got some more interesting medtech stakeholders, people from slightly outside of the field, entrepreneurs, VCs, and also we have the chief medical officer of Microsoft, who's one of our talking heads on it. So I think it goes to show we're not the only people kind of speaking this kind of language at the moment. There's a lot of interest.
Important to a lot of people in that ecosystem and that supply chain, right?
Absolutely. So the three things we found in this year's survey, focusing on that upstream portion of the journey, which is the thing that gets people to a diagnosis and then presumably eventually to a treatment, are we need to improve the awareness of symptoms and treatment options. And that goes back to your the sort of the putting on the back burner this paternalistic attitude of doctor knows best, and much more, not quite patient autonomy, but maybe somewhere halfway between complete patient autonomy and the patrician attitude of physician, somewhere where you can have a two-way conversation. So, but awareness of symptoms and treatment options is important. People still feel we don't have the right tools and or processes for reaching a diagnosis, or at least not in a standardized fashion. And I'm aware that using the term standardized and personalized appear to be mutually exclusive, but I'll go into that in a bit more detail. There are some nuances there. And the third thing we heard once again was that coordination and communication across the entire pathway was lacking. So if I just talk a bit about symptom awareness, there is a kind of lack of awareness of what some of the symptoms mean. We've talked about heart disease. You know, people know that chest pain's a red flag. People aren't aware that pain in the leg might be a sign that they may be months away from an amputation. And it may take the appearance of a wound on the foot, for example, to know that there is arterial insufficiency to the leg. So we heard that just under half of patients with coronary disease and peripheral arterial disease, when they first developed symptoms, thought their symptoms weren't a big deal. Mm-hmm. And up to 70% of physicians said very clearly that patients were unaware that their symptoms might be due to disease. And again, half of the patients said they struggled to recognize their symptoms. So there is an element of education here. And you may say, well, what's that got to do with Abbott? Well, it hasn't got anything to do with us. We're not a public healthcare agency. But it does enable us to frame the fact that education and medical literacy could be very, very important when we think about patient care and the overall patient care experience. If we talk about the business about standardized processes and techniques for diagnosis, disappointingly, 20% of patients feel that their centers and their physicians don't have the right tools. What's even more disappointing is 25% of physicians think they don't have the right tools as well. So that's a problem. And 30% of healthcare administrators think that there is no standardized approach. Now, of course, that's not a universal truth. Some centers, some geographies have guidelines, but they may not necessarily be followed. And the third thing is the coordination and communication. And we've talked about this extensively before. There's the whole business around suboptimal coordination and communication channels between both specialists, primary care physicians, and patients. There's the length of time to get appointments, the thought that doctors aren't talking to each other, and that really can impact how patients feel. We heard that particularly for patients with peripheral arterial disease, some of them felt they were, and I quote, misdiagnosed 3 or 4 times. Now, they may not have been. They may have just gone through a cadence of investigations. But if they're not kept informed that this is the way that we go about investigating this condition, they will think they're being sent for random tests and investigations. So that's one little touchstone that really emphasizes the importance of communication in this journey.
I'm curious. We're almost out of time here.
Oh, okay.
Let's wrap up with this. I'd love to get your thoughts on how has what you've learned so far in this process influenced either how you have or will make your products change, design your products and services that go with it. Have you seen some things that you can already tell this will influence today or down the road how we do what we do as Abbott?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it just brings me back to one final finding, which was we found some very interesting points about peripheral arterial disease who experienced more challenges than coronary patients in this survey. And in particular, we looked at social determinants of health. And it will not surprise you that the most underserved populations had the biggest barriers to getting good healthcare in terms of accessing physicians, in terms of the emotional aspect and the relationship with their healthcare physician. And there was a linear correlation. There was also the issue, just when we're talking about the underserved populations, the issues with female patients. They again have more challenges than men. And younger patients often dismiss their symptoms. So we looked at a lot of these social aspects. How that's influenced us is, in particular, if I think about the peripheral arterial disease space, it's led to us looking very carefully, for example, at our clinical trial strategy and trying to make sure that we make the trial much more representative of the populations. As you'll be aware, many clinical trials just recruit from what they can recruit from, and that means you get underrepresentation, certainly from women, and definitely from ethnic minorities, who we know in the peripheral arterial disease space are much more likely to have amputations than Caucasians. So it's really influenced our trial strategy. We're currently undertaking a study called LIFE-BTK, which is a study of treatment of disease in the arteries below the knee. And we've gone out of our way to make sure we've gone to the less well-served and well-resourced populations to try and bring an impact there. We are also thinking about access to healthcare. We're thinking about other ways we can make healthcare more accessible. We're thinking of how we can engage with patients. Time precludes me going into that right now. I think you'll be saved by the bell in just a moment. But just to say, this is also part of our sustainability plan as Abbott. We're reaching about 2 billion patients across the business at the moment, worldwide. We hope to reach another billion patients by 2030. And we hope that by focusing on diversity and inclusivity in clinical trials and indeed in clinical practice, by trying to increase the access for all of our tools, we can meaningfully impact the patient journey.
And help everyone in the process, not just a subset of us. Well, it's been really fascinating. Thanks for coming back, and interesting to touch on some of the parallels of how you think about this as a physician and a product company at the same time. So Dr. Nick West, Chief Medical Officer and DVP, Global Medical Affairs, Vascular with Abbott. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Mitchell.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hello, everyone. This is Judith Hurwitz coming to you from Techstrong Research. I'm here with Dan Kirsch, Managing Director, and Mitch Ashley, Principal, and Judith Hurwitz, President of Techstrong Research. And we're here today to give you our impressions of the Amazon reInvent conference. We just came back from that the other day, tired but happy, and like to share some of our impressions. So I will start by telling you that it was a lot bigger than I expected, given the pandemic. I guess my overall impression is that it was less about 1,000 new APIs and 1,000 product announcements. It was more about, here is a maturing AWS, a platform that is focused more on the enterprise, whether it's security of APIs, looking at the ability to have cloud everywhere, manageability, beginning to introduce some more end user tools, more partnerships galore, interesting partnership with Goldman Sachs around a solutions cloud, especially focused on data. Most of the announcements were around serverless data, some WAN announcements, cloud at the edge. So that, from an overview perspective, and would like to get some discussion going. So, Mitch, how about what you saw that was interesting at reInvent?
First, it was fun to join you and do that in person. So doing it together was a lot of fun. We had some great meetings and things. Just an overall from the conference, I sensed that a lot of people were glad to be at a conference again. It was good to be in person, interacting, and not just Zooming everything. So that I think there is a pent up desire to be back at conferences, though not necessarily a rush to it. It's interesting your comment about a million, 1,000 different APIs. Amazon AWS always has more announcements than we have time to read. There are plenty of announcements. But something to build on what you said is about a maturing cloud. I was really struck by the ISV Partner of the Year was Sumo Logic. They were selected by Amazon. A log, what we would have thought of as a log management, and I would think of it as observability and tracing and SRE. That says a lot. If that's their lead partner, there are applications, mission critical, maturing. People need, better and better capabilities to manage everything from serverless and cloud native to lift and shift applications in the cloud, so that they're using tools like Sumo Logic in their own data center. So that very much jives with what you were saying about the maturing of the cloud.
Yeah. So Dan, you were our virtual analyst at this conference, and you were watching a lot of the sessions in real time as we were spending our hours walking from one place to another. So, what was your sense of the conference?
Yeah, my Fitbit numbers are definitely lower than you guys, as I sat at my desk all day while you guys ran around Las Vegas. Always fun seeing how many miles you walk in those hotels. But one thing I thought was interesting is really the customers at Amazon. These keynotes. It was Adam Silipsky's first keynote as CEO of AWS reInvent, and so they spent a lot of time thinking about what customers are we going to highlight at this keynote that a lot of people are going to watch. So you got developers watching it, CIOs, you have Wall Street watching it, Wall Street analysts. And we didn't see any cool fintech vendors or born on Amazon vendors or the Netflix of the world who are no longer small, but totally on the cloud. Instead, it was big enterprises with a ton of technical debt who had mainframes and all sorts of on-premises environments. So I quickly jotted it down. I think it was NASDAQ, Dish, United Airlines, and 3M. You don't think of those companies as really sexy, cutting-edge companies, but I thought it told us a lot that that's who they chose to highlight at the keynote. And in particular, NASDAQ was pretty interesting. They're planning to use Outposts, AWS's on-prem instance of the cloud. So it's sort of a on-premises AWS that's fully managed by Amazon. And so they plan on building a on-premises financial cloud in their New Jersey offices. Now, whether when that will be done, when we'll see it, I don't know. Outpost was announced, I think it was 2 years ago at this point.
I think it
was 3 years ago that was the preview. And so it's been slow. We haven't really seen huge deployments of Outpost. So it should be interesting to sort of track how this goes and where we are in a year with this NASDAQ deployment.
I think that's a very good point. It was also interesting as part of the keynote that United made a point of saying that they were looking at all different clouds and they were discussing whether they should do multi-cloud or single cloud, and they made the deliberate decision to only go with the Amazon cloud. And I think that was a subliminal message that don't worry about multi-cloud, come with us. So I thought that was interesting. One of the preview, if you listen to Werner Vogel's session, which he's always wonderful to listen to, he talked about this Amplify Visual Studio, their low-code platform, and the three of us were discussing this earlier. Mitch, what was your impression of that?
It's one of the maturing in the cloud also means that competition is heating up, which I think is why United was a good person for them to put up of, you don't have to be multi-cloud. But to the low-code point that you raised, what's sticky in the cloud? And I think we used to think of, all the services, the plethora of services that you can get in AWS, from whatever range of database service to, Lambda and everything else, were things that would tie people into one cloud or make it hard to get out of. And the other clouds have completed or raced and created their own versions of those things. And they're very similar, different APIs, et cetera. But people are used to saying, well, I need to be able to support more than one, persistent storage versus long-term storage, whatever. So I think that's less about stickiness in the low-code, build your app on our platform, our low-code platform, now use all our services. That's harder to move. We got to rebuild the app now. Totally.
I think the other thing that I think was interesting about the low-code platform is that it's much more aimed at the non-developer. Mm-hmm. The person in the business unit that needs to do some graphical development. And of course, when you do that graphical development with Amplify Studio, you are using all of automatically you get access to all of the Amazon services. Mm-hmm. So I think that was it's an interesting move. It's also interesting that that they're not early to market with a visual development low-code platform. I think the other thing that I thought was very interesting was their focus on security, and especially around APIs and some of the issues around that. So Dan, you were we were talking earlier about some of the API security issue, identity and access management.
Yeah, I think it all goes back to Amazon really talking to the enterprise, talking to decision makers. The developer community is critical for Amazon, but they're trying to expand who they're talking to, and security and the API security is really important. Werner pointed out, the idea that once you have an application or a product and you've incorporated APIs, just like software, APIs never die. So you really need to think about the security around your APIs, the support, how active is the community, how many users are using that API, and how often is it updated. And there's lots and lots of talk about really complex areas of security and cryptography and really interesting stuff. Access and identity still is one of the top things that's a struggle for companies. And then along with API management, there's applications made up of dozens and dozens of APIs. It's really what makes all of our mobile applications possible, what makes the web applications possible. It's how a startup with 5 employees can build an application that thousands or millions of people use. So I think that's sort of what they're getting at is talking to that higher level within the companies, within companies who are totally focused on security. Because I think, when did we write Cloud for Dummies? I think 2009.
Right.
And security was important then with the cloud, and it's still sort of the top conversation at any time you're talking about the cloud.
It's interesting. And just my experience in applications and security and what happens inside of IT and outside of IT, there's 3 reasons why every app will eventually come to IT, almost every app. One is security, identity management, access control. Second is get access to data they don't have access to. And third is apps, get access to apps that they don't have. It was interesting. I had a conversation with the CISO of a large coffee company, who you can probably guess who that might be. And they had a really cool strategy where they put together an identity management and access control strategy, put the infrastructure in place that connected into their IT systems. And that was one of the ways they got people to work with IT right up front or with the security team and solve that, not just in the cloud, but with the cloud. So you got not just the service from the cloud, but also, okay, it's already hooked into all their stuff, both on-prem and cloud. But to your point, Dan, it starts and ends with security, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Well, what was interesting in talking about stickiness, one of the things that Werner was talking about is having identity and access management. There's, of course, integrated into every API that they offer. And that's thousands of APIs. So I think that, clearly that's an issue from Amazon, being viewed by the market as an enterprise player is, Microsoft has Office 365. Google has, this, Google Office platform. And both of those provide incredible stickiness. In fact, it used to be that Microsoft gave away Azure to entice customers onto their platform. Now they give away Office 365. So it's interesting that I think that Amazon is in search for what will allow them to have that stickiness with enterprise customers.
Well, and that was when we were talking to vendors when they're thinking about Microsoft with Azure in the early days. One of the reasons they were, Microsoft was a platform people were interested in is you could port your on-prem access and identity, and it was exactly the same on Azure. So it made it really easy to move to, when Azure was just sort of .NET in the cloud, you could move your access and identity management and all your rules just right up to Azure without having to sort of rethink it.
Yeah.
Active Directory is sitting right there ready for you.
Right. So
I think too, Judith, around the API and the security issue is with the proliferation of API economy, API designed applications, APIs aren't just the outer shell to get into apps. They're all part and all throughout the apps. So who is using that? Who has access to those? That's a massive issue. So Amazon stepping up to that, I think, is really important. A great sign. I think we're going to see everybody doing that.
So I think we'll close out this great discussion with each one of us talk about 3 top takeaways from reInvent. So I'll start with my 3. One, the many of the issues we've already discussed, but I would add into that a lot of focus on database. I think they're also looking at Snowflake, and so they have a data lake platform that they announced. Also, a lot of focus on serverless, as well as we talked about a lot of the security platforms. And the bottom line is, it's all about the enterprise and Amazon as a mature enterprise player. Okay, so since I took all of the good topics, Dan, what do you want to add in?
Yeah, so certainly all about the enterprise. I forget if it was a preview or generally available. I think it's available. They introduced AWS mainframe modernization platform and the mainframe migration platform. So there's tons of businesses and governmental organizations still on the mainframe. They're still on COBOL. Every COBOL programmer is retiring every single day. But what the mainframe is known for is bulletproof dependability. And here on December 7th, my robot vacuum cleaner and lots of people's rings and all sorts of other Amazon-enabled technology is out because one of the regions of AWS is out. So, and a lot of that is, architecting for resiliency. You need failover, of course, but to really be that backbone that enterprises depend on, you need to have a high level of dependability, and Amazon will say, you need to architect in a way to have failover, but they really need to make that very easy for customers to do with a lot of automation and make it easy. So that's one is, the dependability is still key. Security is key. And then I thought it was interesting this, we've talked about it a lot, that talking to the enterprise. I had the luxury of watching from home. I had Twitter up, and a lot of people in the developer community were saying, no new announcements. This was boring. This was all marketing fluff. And I thought that was interesting because the hardcore Amazon developers who love every API were a little disappointed because this was sort of an iterative reinvent rather than a big, huge showcase. But at the same time, I thought it showed that AWS is maturing as a platform.
And my three, I was going to say enterprise, but I can't do that now. So my three were, I think number one is competition. It's been competitive, but I think that's rapidly heating up even more so across cloud providers and even with alternative clouds or the next tier down. Something we haven't talked about yet is FinOps, is the financial management of the cloud and managing predictable costs over your Microsoft license, right? That you're used to managing as an IT organization. The last thing would be, they didn't forget about the developer, at least in terms of bug bust. They had a competition going on to be part of Guinness World Book of Records. Our company played a role in helping with some of that. That was cool. It was great kind of to see them doing something fun and unique, different. I don't know. I haven't seen that before. So that was a great takeaway. So those are my three.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've had as much fun as we did talking about reInvent, and we'll see you soon in the next episode of Techstrong Research Comes to You. Thanks.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, Devsec Ops, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, welcome back. And rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Dr. Chase Cunningham, who is the Chief Strategy Officer over at Ericom Software. And Dr. Chase Cunningham recently penned a book that focuses on how cyber attacks have become a threat to national security. So the two of them have a conversation about that and the state of cybersecurity in general. It is a fascinating conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Dr. Chase Cunningham, who is CSO for Ericom Software, and along with Greg Tuhill is the author of a new book called Riptide, a narrative of cybersecurity failure at the national level. We're going to be talking about what that book means and what it's all about. Chase, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So there's a ton of security books out there. So why did you feel compelled to write this one, and what should people take away from it?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of security books that are kind of the nonfiction thing that you would read like in a college course. We wanted to write this one really more around kind of spinning a tale, the narrative side of what it would look like to run through this whole thing. And the point of it really was to get across that lack of controls and sort of the approach of just one single provider, if not taken correctly, actually enables the bad guys to do more bad things. And at the national level, that's a big problem.
And why is that an issue now? Because the government has been outsourcing stuff for years. So what's changing, and why is this conversation front and center?
Yeah, so cloud continues to grow. We had the JEDI contract, which was a big contract that kind of got thrown asunder, but it was that was kind of one of the first inklings of having these single provider systems is going to continue to be a focus for the federal government. And Greg and I thought that there was a need to stress to folks that we have to approach that problem cautiously, because if we just take our legacy systems and throw them into this new sort of model without actually approaching it, correctly, we wind up in a worse place than we were in the first.
Do you think that the government is going to be multi-cloud anyway? And I wonder if that's just going to force the issue of having multiple providers and they may not even be the cloud provider themselves, because you ultimately need to apply policies across multiple cloud platforms. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of where I guess you'd say the technical side of this thing is. It's really going to be multi-cloud when you look at it. It's going to require policy engines to do policy things. But we also spun in some pieces in the story around software development lifecycle, outsourced vendors, providers, third parties. There's so many moving parts that the whole goal of this was to be as true to the actual problem, but also kind of narratively describe what it means.
If I have a single provider, what is the threat? I mean, is it just that they're going to get compromised and they have access to everything and I don't have enough layers of my defense? Or what exactly is the issue there?
Well, the real problem when you're looking at the way that the government does business, when they say single provider, what they mean is that they're going to have one sort of, big battleship to put things in place. And then there's also going to be lots and lots of other moving parts that are going to be part of that single provider ecosystem. And for what we were trying to get across here was, yeah, that makes sense. And yes, it's probably good for the purposes of budget. But in reality, all of those moving parts have to be managed, maintained, and controlled at the correct level with the correct controls. And they have to realize that anytime you bring something in, whether it be vendor, third party, single provider, et cetera, it's probably compromised already. So you have to approach it from that sort of mindset.
The government tends to buy the thing that costs the less, and that may not always be the best. Does the whole model that the government uses to acquire technology kind of work against security?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the other issue too is when we really look at where we get like actual technology from, silicon, all the way down to that level, processors and whatnot, they're not necessarily United States things. We're not buying them from Omaha, Nebraska. We're buying them from nations that are overt in their sort of willingness to try and get inside of our networks and do things. So we have to be aware of that as well. And it just, there's so many different complex levels of potential problem here that if we're not honest about it, we don't really talk about it and that people understand it, it will become an actual issue. And we scratched at that towards the end of the book where we talked about the actual fallout from what goes wrong with this approach.
On the plus side, the government is prepared to now spend more money on cybersecurity. We're seeing all these bills come through, but I guess, is there an actual equation between the amount of money spent and the actual security outcome, or is it more about just understanding the processes and having the people in place to execute it?
So this is 100% about strategy. This is not about spending more, because we've already tried that for the last 30 something years. We've spent a lot of money and it hasn't really made much of a difference. If anything, we've probably painted ourselves into more of a corner. So this is where we see, with the executive order and the establishment of zero trust offices within the federal government, strategy is starting to become a pretty interesting point of conversation there. And I think that that's a really good thing. That's what we want, is we want more folks to not talk about tech for the sake of tech. We want strategic investments because they understand the problem.
A lot of people are talking about artificial intelligence these days as it applies to cybersecurity. And a lot of the thinking is that we'll make up for our shortage of personnel. And of course, the government probably is shorter than everybody else when it comes to expertise and personnel. But what is your take on the viability of relying on AI to make up for that shortage of people? Am I just going to augment some more folks and hope for the best, or is there something better going to happen?
Well, I mean, number one, there is no AI. It's machine learning that's been marketed as AI. So I think people have to remind themselves of that. We're talking about really good algorithms and math and sort of process and compute. So, but where that actually ties into this is, like you're saying, I can have one person do the job of 5 or 10 or 15, and then we do start to solve that sort of human capital problem. And I would say too that I think unequivocally the technology to have a better security capability is available now. But really, it's about how you put it in place and what you use to meet the adversary at the door. And those types of solutions, if they're put in correctly, can help you do that at scale.
Should agencies, or for that matter, any company, really be implementing security themselves these days, or should they be relying on external experts because it's just gotten too hard, too complex, and too difficult to win that fight?
I think that there's a sort of a calculation that has to happen there. I think you should always have someone in your organization that is tasked specifically with leading the security effort. But if you're not going to put the resources in place and you don't have the capabilities and expertise, I think you should be outsourcing that. There's no reason that a candy company should be a candy company with a sock. They should just make candy. Outsource that stuff to somebody. But I do think you need a leader that is tasked with managing security, no matter what, at every organization.
Do you think the job of security in the government is harder because there's so many more nation states that are targeting these government agencies, and those guys are some of the best hackers in the world?
I think really the problem that we have there is the complexity that we continue to introduce into the space, and the fact that there are so many moving parts and so many vendors and third parties and et cetera, et cetera. And the adversary is dedicated. I mean, they're willing to take the time to go after the things that they see are of value. Doesn't matter if it takes them 6 months or 6 years. If it's a target that's worth their time and effort, they'll do it. And that the long game is very valuable in cyber, especially cyber warfare.
They're extremely patient. What's your best advice to folks right now if you're in charge of an agency somewhere and they come to you and say you're going to head up security? What would be top of mind for you?
Well, number one is know where you are, know what you already have in place, and have a really good understanding of the current sort of avenues of compromise that are there, and then start whittling away at the simple stuff first. If you haven't enabled multi-factor auth on all those accounts, do it. If you're past that, start looking at isolation, segmentation, et cetera. So, and be, Greg says it all the time. I think it's a great way of looking at it is start small, think big, and scale fast. If you can do those, I think you're starting to really get the problem in hand.
I feel like today, even though we've been working from home and all these things have changed, we're still basically relying on some form of endpoint security software and some point of a firewall, and people really haven't delved that much deeper into their tech space. So are we just not prepared because at the end of the day, we just can't figure out how to manage all these other platforms we need?
Well, that's why I say I think we're at a point where folks should actually look at it and kind of go, the technology to do this at scale and to make it easy exists, but it will require a change in thinking, and it will require some investment on your end to sort of fix that problem. If you don't do those things, it's a gamble. I mean, it's a matter of time and effort, and how valuable are you to the adversary. But this doesn't have to necessarily be extremely complex and extremely difficult. In all reality, the organizations I've worked with, when they get into security strategy, things get actually simpler and better over time.
Is shifting the management of security up to the cloud part of that equation? It seems like a lot of the stuff we have in place today is on-premise with a separate console somewhere, and then I wind up swiveling my chair between all these different consoles, and I see everything and understand nothing.
I think cloud is where things are going to go, and honestly should go. It's the last kind of greenfield environment, but you do have to be cautious about taking your, like you said, on-prem legacy, whatever, and shoving it into the cloud and going, okay, now we're cloud enabled. All you've done is introduce other avenues of compromise into an already threatened system. So it requires a focus of effort. But in my opinion, in my experience, if you want to get safer, cloud is a very good way to go.
It seems like the attack surface is getting wider as well. We're seeing all these endpoints at the edge. Are we prepared for that? And do we understand the implications of that? It seems like we're going to do the same thing we always do, which is we're going to roll out some new workloads and then we're going to figure out security as an afterthought yet again.
Yeah, that's part of the problem is the speed to market, speed for delivery, application development, all those things it's ahead of security, and it's going to continue to be that way. I mean, if we're real about it, but it doesn't mean that we have to live in that world. There are ways to enable security controls that won't cause so much or so many avenues, and that's where you're trying to get to. This is also something where folks should realize you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be bulletproof, but you can be bullet resistant, I guess is a good way of putting it. And that's that's the value is if I'm a harder target than someone else, the bad guys will go somewhere else.
I often marvel that things are not worse than they are. We've all had some major incidents over the years, but I don't think we've had that catastrophic event. Do you think that's coming still, or is it just going to be a death by 1,000 cuts going forward?
I think the regular stuff is going to continue to be a problem. Unfortunately, until we have I would say, catastrophic loss of human life based on a cyber incident, it's not going to really sink into folks that this is a legit sort of problem and a warfare enabled thing. I mean, those of us that are in the space, we get it, and we're still kind of, people talk to us and go, okay, sure, yeah, whatever, we'll get to it. But until we have some catastrophic, unfortunate, terrible loss of human life based on a cyber attack, it's not going to be given the seriousness that it needs to be.
And if that does happen, will security still be something that IT teams are responsible for, or do you think that we'll up-level our entire game and we might have specialists who are thinking about security not just from an IT perspective, but just from a more holistic, broad-based approach that includes physical security and cybersecurity?
I think we're already starting to see some of that, where you do see a lot of organizations that are starting to hire CISOs and CIOs that have security backgrounds and are really thinking kind of big picture security strategy. And I think that's a very good thing. It doesn't translate necessarily well to the small and mid-sized business because those folks are, not a dime a dozen. They're hard to get, and they're, sort of specialized skill set. But we'll continue to get bigger, better, faster over time. And luckily, because of the way we work now, you can share information, which hopefully happens more as we continue to grow in this effort.
All right. We gave you the magic wand. What's the one thing you would change about security overnight if it was in your power?
The one thing I would change about security overnight if it was in my power is it would be, I would actually like for there to be a standard for negligence and actually show some punishment for organizations that knowingly negate security controls. I think that, unfortunately, pain is the best teacher there is. And until there's some real pain, not fines, I'm talking prison time, it's not going to matter.
All right. Otherwise known as reckless disregard, right?
If you built an airplane and you knew the wings were going to fall off and, it crashed, somebody would get in trouble.
All right. Well, here's hoping things get better in 2022. But Chase, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate your time.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All right, everybody, that wraps up today's Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's conversations as much as I did. A quick reminder, today, FinCon DX virtual event is happening. You can go online if you want to check it out. It's geared for the for the financial services sector and FinOps, but anybody's welcome, and there are a lot of takeaways regardless of what industry you're in. So please, I do encourage you to check it out. Just go to techstrongevents.com and check it out. We've got the agenda there. We've got the speaker lineup, and we've got the registration link. So hopefully you can join us. It is our last online event of the year, and we want to go out with a bang, as it were. So please do join us for that one. It's going to be a barn buster, folks. And with that, we are going to be back on Monday with a new Techstrong TV broadcast. We're going to be doing broadcast shows next week on our regular schedule. We have new shows Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday next week. Then the week of the 21st, I believe, we will have a show on that Monday. And then that's going to be our final show of 2021. So do hope you can join us for these final few Techstrong TV broadcasts before we close out the year. But I will see you back here on Monday with a fresh new show for you. So I hope everybody can join me then. And until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.